To start off, this happened a little over 10 years ago. Everything I'm going to tell you was written down back then, while it was still fresh in my mind. I came across the notes again, and it made me remember the entire night all over again. At the time when this happened, I was 27 years old. I was pretty much raised as a woodsman and a hunter. My grandfather took me out into the woods every chance that he had. Hunting, fishing, tracking, trapping, just about everything, living off the land skills. My dad, on the other hand, he was involved in emergency services. So I grew up around incident command, medical first responders, all that boring stuff. Naturally, I ended up becoming a dedicated volunteer with the local ground search and rescue unit when I turned 18. After only a year, I was made a team captain. Between that and my former job, I seen murder, suicide, accident victims, bodies in all states of rot and decay. But as the years go by, you get a thick skin. So I thought I could handle anything. But I was wrong. The names have been changed, and the area won't be mentioned for, I'll just say that we were in the northeast of North America. Around 1 a.m. on a Thursday morning, we got a call for a missing native hunter. He didn't return home after heading out to drop a few bags of apples at his deer blind. Calls like this happen often. Most of the time, the hunter gets a deer and stays the night to pack it out in the morning. Sometimes somebody falls. One guy had a heart attack dragging heavy apples, but most of the time everything turns out to be alright. We meet at the local mall, hop in our transport bus, and head the 3 hours out. We arrive around 6 a.m. The missing man is about 40 years old. He carries a rifle. He's hunted this area his whole life. It is pretty strange. All the native hunters are good in the woods, and 40 is pretty young for some sort of heart attack, but it happens. My team of 5 heads out from where his truck is parked on an old logging road. There's me, Jan, C, Steven, and Kyle. We all have wilderness backgrounds and were selected because we've proven ourselves. Each of us carries basic survival gear, advanced medkits, electronic and old school navigation tools. The hunter's family gave us coordinates for the blind, so that's where we go. It's roughly noon now. According to the GPS, we're getting close. We are in a line search formation, about 10 feet apart. A loud scream suddenly echoes through the trees. It sounded like a woman getting stabbed in a slasher film. The 2 teammates on either side of me immediately break formation, and they rush towards me. I grab my radio to call it in, but I get nothing, just harsh feedback. A brand new 1400 real-time tracking radio, and they're still completely useless. I tell the others to move. We start heading towards the scream and towards the deer blind. About 10 minutes later, I finally see some camouflage netting draped between the trees. We have found the blind, and as we get close, the very first thing that I see are 2 large male foxes. The moment that I hear their screeching, I recognize the sound, and it's not the most comforting. The foxes bolt the moment that they notice us. I raise my hand and tell my team to hold back while I move in and check the blind. Seeing that the hunter's pack lying here is already a bad sign. It means that the owner is nearby, and not in a good way. The first thing I notice besides the shredded pack are 2 full burlap sacks lying on the ground. Then I take in the state of the blind itself. It looks absolutely wrecked, torn up, leaves kicked everywhere, boot prints circling the area, and about 16 empty casings all around the ground, as if someone ran in panic circles, firing wild in every direction. The hunter is not in the blind. None of it makes any sense. I try my radio again. Still nothing but static. I check my phone. No signal at all. I slowly back out the same way that I came in order to preserve the scene in case this turns into a police investigation. Once I get to the others, I jot down every detail in my notepad. Then I pull out my compass. The others do the same. Something is wrong, and we need to move. It's around 2 p.m. now, and we're making good time when Jen suddenly tells us to stop so that she can recheck our bearings. I check mine. I'm still on the same course, but everyone else is telling me that I'm wrong. We then compare readings, and somehow, every single GPS unit is giving completely different information. Just fucking perfect. Exactly what we need. I take out the map again. Triangulation is nearly impossible because the forest is so tall, and according to the lines, the terrain should be sloping downhill back towards the road, but we're obviously heading uphill. This never happens to us. Ever. I try to keep myself calm, and then tell everybody to stop. We take a break, eat some rations, hydrate, and settle down for a moment. Once we gather ourselves, we form a game plan. Everyone studies the map and compass again. A minute later, everyone somehow still has a different idea where we should be heading. GPS, still useless. Radios, still dead. We then check everything again. Kyle says that we need to go north and points one way. Jen immediately agrees with him, except north on my compass is somewhere entirely different. I look down at mine, then at theirs, and I realize all 5 of them are pointing in 5 different directions. These things only behave like that when there's a massive metal source or some magnetic field nearby. Something is seriously wrong. We're lost. Search and rescue. Lost. It's embarrassing, but better than pretending otherwise. And the rule number 1 whenever you're lost, stay where you are. I fire 3 red pen flares straight into the air. Then we blow our Fox 40 whistles over and over again until our ears ring. Hours go by. 10 more flares. Endless whistle blasting. By now the sun is going down. The clouds are rolling in. The temperature is dropping and the rain is starting. Search mode is now off and survival mode is now on. We build a fire and get it going. The rain picks up. It's starting to get cold and we're soaked. We drink from our canteen cups. We talk a bit and we try not to get discouraged. Eventually we decide on a fire watch rotation through the night. I take first watch. It's always the best shift because you get to sleep longer afterward. I'm barely covered, getting wet and colder by the minute, so I decide to get up and collect more firewood. At this point the rain is slowing down anyway, and we need more fuel. This is where everything begins to unravel. I'm about 15 or 20 feet away, snapping off dead branches, when I hear something loud, followed by screaming. I run back towards the shelters. Both of them are collapsed, completely destroyed, and my 4 teammates are crawling out from underneath the broken framework. What the hell happened? We're trained to build them pretty strong. They don't just fall over. At this point, Jen is crying, shaking. Someone was here. Kyle demands to know where I was. I tell him that I was gathering firewood. We're able to calm Jen down enough for her to talk. She says that she woke up suddenly with a sick feeling in her stomach. She then heard footsteps and assumed it was me walking around, until she heard a loud crack. She then rolled over, and in the firelight, saw the silhouette of an extremely large person pushing down on the main crosspost of both shelters. Then everything caved in on top of them. That's when I feel my anger spike instantly. Most likely some inbred rednecks screwing around out here. We pack quickly. I did search the area, but I didn't find any footprints. No crushed ferns. No sort of disturbance. Whoever, or whatever it was, seemed to have moved around here with nobody noticing. Steven, on the other hand, wants us to stay put. Our navigation is still useless. Our radios are still dead, but I'm done waiting. I assigned everyone a number. When I yell the number 1, each person shouts their number in order. We'll spread out slightly, just enough to form a line. That way we don't miss an old ATV trail or any sort of path. We turn on the headlamps, grip our mag lights, and we start marching. After 100 paces, I call out, 1, 2, echoes from my left, 3, a little further, 4, from Jen's side, 5, from Steven, then, from somewhere to my right, 4, like a dying moose, trying to speak through a slit throat, 4. I then shine my light towards the sound, 4, and that's when I see it. A figure, a person, if you can even call it that, standing by the trees, at least 7 fucking feet tall, a camo hunting jacket stretching across its body, its arms low, hands nearly reaching its knees, one leg longer than the other. I shine my light up to its face, and my stomach lurches. One side looks normal, but the other side looks melted. The right eye sits 3 inches lower than the left. The bottom lip falls below the chin. I fucking scream. Full panic, high pitch, like a terrified kid, and I fall backwards onto the ground. This thing, its lip, it curls up into an impossible smile that stretches all the way towards its ear. That's when my team rushes to me. This thing, creature, whatever it is, it drops onto all fours and runs into the forest with terrifying speed, like a fucking cheetah cutting through brush. Nobody else saw it, but they all heard it, copying number 4. Jen turns ghost white, tears streaming down her face. I just want to go home. I reload my pen flare. I try the radio again, but nothing. That's it, we're leaving. Arms reach distance. No more line search. We then hike as fast as our legs can move. Feels like miles. Branches snapping everywhere. At some point we even hear footsteps racing alongside us, behind us, ahead of us. Something is running circles around our group. And the worst part, we kept hearing it. It kept calling out that 4, and every time it repeats it, it was starting to sound a little more human, a little more like one of us. By dawn, the sounds finally fade, and the voice stopped. Suddenly, Steven whispers, "Did you hear that?" We stop. A whistle. I then blow mine. Another whistle answers. We run to it, blowing our whistles non-stop. Finally, we stumble into another search team. The leader, Dave, immediately starts asking us questions. Are we okay? What happened? Did we lose contact? Why wasn't our tracking radio pinging? Then suddenly, as if nothing ever happened, both of our radios crackle back to life. Team 4, we just picked up Team 1's signal. They're right on top of you. Are they with you? The GPS is working again. The compass is working again. Everything is fucking suddenly normal now. Dave then says that they found the hunter. Where? I ask. At his deer blind. No fucking way. He wasn't there. I then describe the blind, the scattered leaves, the empty casings, the shredded pack. My team backs me up, but they're shaken. But Dave is just insisting that the Team 3 took photos. In their pictures, the leaves are untouched. The blind is perfectly intact. There's no casings. Apples are neatly placed in one pile. Everything looks completely normal. Back at command, I give my report. I leave out the creature, but I describe the blind exactly as I saw it. They show me Team 3's photos. None of it matches. Later, I walk to the ambulance. I wanted to get to the hunter and ask him some questions. I turn the corner, and there he is. This thing that I saw in the woods. I swear, it's him. only now he looks fully human. But the face, the jacket, and that feeling that I got, I know it's him. He opens his eyes, looks right at me, and smiles. My whole body rejects it, just pure instinct. I turn around, I grab my gear, and I get on the bus. My team then sits in silence the whole drive home. A few days later, my search manager tells me that the hunter is physically fine, but he's starting to act strange. Shock, trauma, exposure. They claim they don't know, but I do. And I can't shake the feeling that we bring something out of the wilderness that doesn't belong with us, because whatever I saw, whatever walked out of those woods with Team 3, that was not the fucking hunter. Ever since that night, sleep has never felt the same. Like I said in the beginning, I grew up in the woods, but now the thought of going back makes my stomach twist. I eventually went on smaller searches, and everything seemed normal. But this is the one thing that I try to forget. I'm pretty new to this, but I just had to get this out there. I have to tell someone about this, and I felt like this was the best place to tell people. This all started when I used to live in a small town in Arkansas, with a population around 5,000 plus people. It was a typical average, conservative town. In the summers it was hot and humid, and in the winter it was dark and cold. I grew up on Southern entertainment, driving four-wheelers, and hunting every deer season, and maybe some small trapping here and there. But this happened during my last year of high school. I was 17 at the time. I had a girlfriend, lots of friends, and a shabby 1972 Ford pickup that I still have to this day. Anyways, it was November. Rifle season had just started, and I had been getting ready for it. My friend, his name is Drew, and I had been planning this trip for months, and we had everything ready. It was Friday, the end of the week, and the start of the weekend. Our plan was to hike up through the national forest, onto the mountain and set up camp and just have a good time. I wish I could have done something to have stopped myself. I woke up at 3 in the morning, leaving a note for my parents, and putting my things in the bed of my truck. I hopped in and drove to my friend's house. He was already waiting for me outside. I got out and said in a whisper, "You have all your things? I don't want to forget anything." "Yeah, I checked again before you got here," he said. He put his bag in my bed and put his gun in the truck, and we took off to the mountain. I had my eyes fixed on the road, and Drew was sitting there with a metal click, and I looked over and he was flicking a lighter on and off. "What's that?" I said, putting my eyes back on the road. "Oh, it's my grandfather's lighter. He had it with him all throughout the war." We then turned and went through the entrance to the hiking site. The change from road to dirt was just as familiar as ever. We stopped and got out. We put on our bags and headed up the mountain trails. It was around 7 and we could see where we were going because the sun was coming over the trees. The birds were chirping, and I could see the squirrels running through the trees chattering. 3 hours of hiking later, we came up the campsite that we followed with our map. When we got there, we quickly set up our tarps, and we were quick to find firewood and to start a fire. I told my friend that I would get us some lunch, and I headed off with my rifle to go get something to eat. I walked for at least half a mile south and found myself breaking the tree line. I decided I would sit and watch for a bit. I sat underneath a large oak tree and looked for any movement. The sun was rising slowly. I was sitting there when all the birds stopped for a moment. The silence was deafening. The sharp ringing in my ear was eerie. I scanned slowly with my eyes only, staying as still as possible. That's when I saw movement across the field. It was hard to make out. I slowly raised my rifle and looked down the hill. A deer had poked its head out of the tree line. I only saw its head and neck from where I was at. I knew it was risky to take a shot, but I also knew I wouldn't have another chance to bag another deer. Regardless, it was a doe anyhow. That's when I noticed something. The deer's head was higher off the ground than most deer should be. I felt like it was watching me. It slowly turned to the left. I could only see its neck and shoulders, and I could hear leaves crunching as it moved deep into the dark forest. A little nervous, I decided to head back to camp. I followed the mental landmarks that I saw the first time. A tree that had fell over, dried up creek bed, and I could see the tarps in the distance through the trees. When I got back to the campsite, we decided it was time to catch up on some sleep. I crawled into my tent and got in my sleeping bag and fell asleep. We got up early that morning. It was still as eerie as it was the day before. It just felt so weird, different. No animals in the area, just silence. It was strange. The air felt heavy. There were no birds anywhere, no deer, rabbits, or anything. Not even any crows crying out. We were getting hungry, and when the sun set, we nestled down waiting for some game to come around. It soon grew dark again, and we decided to come together and to make some beans that I had packed just in case we didn't catch anything. As we were getting everything ready, my friend Drew got up from his seat and said, "I'll be right back. I gotta take a piss." I sat there drinking my water, watching the fire dance. After some time, I noticed that Drew had been gone for a while. That's when I started to get concerned, and I heard leaves crunching, and I jumped and looked towards where the sound came from, and it was Drew. However, his face was pale. "Dude, come over here," he said. "What's over there? Just come over here and look," Drew said as I got up to follow him into the darkness of the forest. As I was walking, I started smelling something horrible, something pungent, and it got stronger and stronger as we walked deeper into the woods. The smell was so bad, and then, as I was walking, something fell on my shoulder. I turned my head to see what it was, but the smell of death made my stomach churn. I leaned over and started to throw up, while this thing that was on my shoulder fell to the floor. It hit the ground with a sickening, squishy sound. I pulled out my light and pointed it to the ground. I got confused for a second when a drop of blood fell on my hand. I looked up and my heart skipped a beat. What I saw was disturbing. The guts of an animal, limbs, pieces. A squirrel that had been impaled on a branch, what was left of it at least. I looked at the face of Drew, still drained of all color. His mouth was open, eyes wide. "Dude, what the fuck?" I said. And that's when we just ran and bolted back to the campsite. How did they get up that high in the tree? Why were they on the branches? "Maybe we should leave," I said. "I agree. I don't want to stay here anymore, man," Drew said. We started shoving our food and things back into the trail packs. That's when we heard crunching a few yards away from us in the pitch black darkness of the forest. And Drew aimed his shotgun at the sound, and I slowly raised my rifle. I pulled out the mag light and pointed it to where we heard the sound. We were about 8 yards away from where we heard it. I flicked on the flashlight, and a deer was leaning, its head out beside a tree next to some brush. With some relief, we lowered our guns, and that's when the deer suddenly fell to the floor. The deer's head rolled down the hill and stopped in front of us. Something had ripped or chewed the deer's head off and rolled it down the hill. But that wasn't the reason I was scared. Someone had been holding the deer's head. And then everything clicked. The bones, the guts, and other miscellaneous parts of animals hanging on the dead tree branches. And that's when I looked up, and a grotesque, elongated hand came from around the tree. We bolted down the hill. I didn't care about our stuff. They could be replaced. We faced in and out of running and jogging. We had our lights and we were looking for a landmark. Anything. Something. That's when I remember that before we came to the trail, there was a big sign with the words, Washita National Forest. I made that a point in my mind and looked around for it with my eyes. My lungs were burning, my legs were in pain, but I kept running. I would glance back and check on Drew and how close he is behind me. I turned off my flashlight, and so did Drew. We laid up against a tree, still as possible. I could see the breath of Drew, frozen in the moonlight. My eyes finally adjusted to the dark, and I looked over at Drew and turned on my light. An arm long and bony, covered in blood, it sank its nails into the shoulder of Drew. Immediately, blood started spewing out. He started screaming in pain, and he was lifted up, screaming louder and more painfully. He was slammed on the ground. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. He was dragged through the forest, screaming, taking shots with his shotgun. With every shot I could see his silhouette, moving further and further into the woods. I ran. I just kept running, and that's when I tripped over something, and I started falling down the rest of the hill. I slammed up against a tree. I stopped and my back was in pain. I realized it was quiet again. There were no crickets. Nothing. Just silence. My eyes already adjusted to the darkness. I could see through the woods. In the distance, the moonlight was shining through the trees. I lay still as possible, and then I heard some shuffling, and I saw that thing moving through the woods. It was strange, jagged, intense. I can't even describe it. It just felt wrong. It was tall and thin. Its bones were rubbing up against its skin. It seemed very malnourished. It shifted back and forth as if it was looking for something. When it turned its face, the grace of the moonlight revealed its features. It was disturbing. It had an elongated chin and small eyes, dark folds of skin around them. The skin was darkish gray. Its mouth was large. It spread all the way across its face. It had its teeth jagged and broken. Its mouth and nose was covered in blood and also in chunks of meat. The blood trailed down and covered its torso. I was about 10 yards away from it, and it crawled on all fours. It started to come towards me. Closer and closer. I could smell it. It smelled like roadkill. That's when I threw up in my mouth and held my breath. My hope at this point was that my death would come quickly. I still had some hope that I would make it out alive. But suddenly, this thing started speaking.
James, James, James.
In the most ungodly voice I ever fucking heard. The part that made my hope disappear was when it started saying my name in my friend's voice.
James, James, James.
It wasn't just like his. It had two tones, one deep, and the other, my friend's voice. It kept saying this and it crawled away through the woods, back up the hill. I stayed there for I don't know how long. I cried silently, and for some reason, I started moving my hand around, and I found something. It was cold and rectangular. I looked closer. It was the lighter that belonged to Drew, and my flashlight had broken on my fall. I stood up slowly and grabbed my bag. I turned and slung it into the woods and ran towards the parking lot. It started screaming my name, but this time, it sounded demonic. This time it was no longer my friend's voice. I kept running and I didn't recognize anything. I flicked the lighter of Drew and scanned the area. My hand ended up hitting something. It was a sign, and with the lighter I read, National Forest. I looked back and heard that same screech, and I ran through the tree line. At a distance I saw my truck. I ran as much as I could, and when I got there I flung the door open and jumped into my truck and started it. I flipped my gears, pulled out, and hit the gas flying out of that parking lot. As I drove, I looked back, and God, I wish I hadn't looked back. It had broken the tree line, and it noticed me driving away. It stopped in the light of the parking lot, now shown in detail. It fucking stood tall. It was at least 9 or 10 feet tall. And its face, I'll never get that picture out of my head. It looked angry, and its eyes were full of hate, and what I assumed at the moment, hungry. I put the pedal to the floor. I tore off the side road and onto the highway. I looked at myself. My jacket was torn and ripped. I was covered in dirt and had cuts and scrapes everywhere. I pulled up to the police station, and according to what information I had gotten, it took a while for the cops to stop me from screaming about that it had killed Drew. A bunch of men got together the next day and rounded up a search party, with the sheriff leading the search. I ended up refusing to go. They scaled through the mountain and searched for my friend. It was nighttime when they found him. He was barely recognizable, they said. They found him under a log. His eyes had been ripped out. His tongue was forcefully pulled out. His arms and legs had been mauled. He had been gutted, and his genitals had been cut off. And his face, they told me his face was scratched and seemed to have been chewed down to the bones. And his neck had been broken in so many places. I can't even express through here how terrible I feel for running and not trying to help him. I still remember his tears streaming down his face before he was dragged away from me. On paper, it was reported as a bear attack. After the incident, my grandfather came and talked to me. He said, "I'm so sorry about what happened to your friend. All the people in my town know the existence of that thing. I heard countless stories of local hunters that have came across it." It's been about 8 years. I'm 25 now. There's not a day that passes that I don't think of my friend. He was my best friend. I'll leave you with this warning. If you ever go camping, be careful and keep yourself armed. I never want something like this to happen to anyone. I don't even wish that experience on my worst enemy. However, I still go hunting to this day, but I warn you, never go into the woods in Arkansas. During winter, you may just find something out there that you don't want to find. And it may just be a mental thing, but sometimes at night, when it's really quiet, I can hear my friend calling my name. Hey everyone, I could really use some help here as I'm starting to get really worried. Last night, I was followed by a very creepy lady when I was out hiking in my local trails at state land. I have hiked and hunted these trails my whole life, and not once have I encountered anything like this. Don't get me wrong, I had my fair share of scary things happen to me when I gone solo camping, but this has scared me right to the bone, and now I think I'm being followed. Let me explain what's been going on, and hopefully one of you may be able to help me out here. Last night, Christmas Eve, I had nothing to do as I have no kids, no wife, and my parents live 3 hours away. So to kill some time and not be bored, I had the idea of going on a solo hike through our local trails. Like I said, I have hiked these trails many times. This time, however, I'll never forget. I got out to the trailhead about 5 p.m. I had my headlamp on, and I knew these trails like the back of my hand, so I wasn't too concerned with the sunlight quickly fading. I don't know if any of you are from Michigan, but we're having a surprisingly sunny and warm December. However, it still gets dark here around 5:30. The weather was beautiful and perfect for a nighttime walk. We don't have too many nice winter days like this, so I wanted to take full advantage and enjoy warm night air. So I got out of my truck and started up the trailhead. This specific trail I was on started out in dense pine trees, and after a mile or so, it opened up to these awesome valleys with huge fields. Most of the time, if I was quiet enough and looked around, I could see some deer grazing and other wildlife. This time though, there was nothing. I was quite surprised there wasn't a single animal, considering how beautiful of a night it was. Now that I think about it, I didn't see or hear even a squirrel in the pines, which is very uncommon. There are many in these parts, and no matter the time, I can always hear them running and playing in the trees. This time, it was dead quiet. I kept on walking though, and just enjoyed the peace and quiet. Once I exited the pines and entered the first field, I started to get this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, like something was watching me. I chalked it up to me being paranoid because of the lack of wildlife, and continued on. I wish I would have turned back right then and there, but if I did, I wouldn't be here telling you the story, would I? Anyways, I continued on and the feeling just intensified as I progressed. At this point, I was a good mile and a half in, and it dawned on me, if there was something out here with me, I was screwed. Not a single person knew that I was out here. I never had cell phone reception in this area. If some kind of animal was stalking me, I would just be done for. I was kicking myself in the ass for not bringing my handgun with me, honestly. We don't have a whole lot of dangerous game here in central Michigan, so I didn't think twice about it when leaving. I was nearing the end of the first field, and before I stepped into the next little section of pines, I decided to take a quick look around, just to satisfy that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. At first, I didn't see anything, but just as I was about to turn back around, something caught my attention. There was slight movement, back about 100 yards behind me. What the heck? I whispered as I squinted to get a better look. I wasn't sure, but it looked like a figure, half hidden behind a bush. I stared closely, and when I saw it shift slightly, my heart leaped into my throat. The figure was definitely humanoid, and it appeared to be staring right at me. "Hey," I foolishly called out, hoping whoever it was would simply identify itself. As soon as I said that, the figure quickly ducked behind the bush, disappearing from my view. My heart was racing pretty good at this point, a million worst case scenarios running through my mind. I couldn't help but think it was a serial killer, ready to pounce and stab me to death, stashing my body in these woods. I turned around and started walking a little faster, trying to distance myself from whoever was out here with me. To my horror, I heard twigs and sticks snapping a little ways behind me as the person started to follow me. "I have a gun," I shouted, trying to scare them into leaving me alone. I looked back over my shoulder to see where they were at, and when I did, my heart started hammering in my chest. I swear I thought I was gonna pass out. The person was now maybe 20 feet behind me, and I could tell it was a woman, except that her jaw was hung open, as if in complete shock, her eyes open extremely wide, staring directly at me. When I first turned around, she was still walking, and the way she moved scared me so bad it sent me into a dead sprint upon looking at her. I know it sounds kind of funny, but believe me, it wasn't. She was tiptoeing as quiet as she could, in the same way a cartoon character would try to be sneaky. Her legs taking these huge, lanky steps. Everything about the way she looked and moved just sent these shivers down my spine. "Leave me alone," I shouted as I ran away as fast as I could. That's when I started to hear her laughing as she chased me. She was no longer trying to be quiet, as I could hear her crashing through the woods, catching up to me rather quickly. I decided to turn and run off the trail once I rounded a bend, where I knew she couldn't see me for a moment. As soon as I stepped off, I quickly hid behind a tree and turned off my headlamp. After a couple of seconds, I heard the sound of her heavy, odd footsteps as she got closer and closer. I held my breath and slammed my eyes shut, sending a quick prayer to the Lord above to just let her pass. Her horrible laughing sounds echoed through the woods as she thankfully ran past me. As soon as her footsteps sounded a little further down, I jumped out from behind the tree and took off running back the way I came. I hadn't even gotten 20 feet when I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from behind me in the woods. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, running on pure adrenaline and the will to live. I just knew if she caught me, I wouldn't make it, and it would be a horrible, painful way to die. The sound of her footsteps once again got louder and louder as she got closer. How the hell was she running so fast? I felt a huge wave of relief as I saw the entrance to the trail, maybe 100 feet ahead. Somehow, I ran even faster as I knew my truck would be right there. I digged into my pockets and fished my keys out. She let out another hideous scream as she got even closer, maybe 50 feet behind me now. I got into my truck and jumped in, putting my keys in the ignition and starting it in record time. I backed out and peeled out of there as fast as I could without losing control. After one final scream of frustration, I looked in my rearview mirror to watch the woods disappear. The whole drive home I kept checking behind me, afraid I would see her chasing after me, even though I knew it would be impossible at 60 miles per hour. 5 minutes later, I pulled into my driveway and jumped out of the truck once parked, running full blast inside. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. I ran all around my house, locking every window and door, not feeling safer until I knew I was locked up and safe. I walked upstairs to my bedroom and laid in bed. After a little while, I must have passed out from being exhausted. I awoke to the pitch black room and quiet house. My heart started racing as I remembered the lady from the forest, and I jumped up to look out my window. No, I whispered as I looked in my backyard. The lady from the woods was standing in my backyard, slack-jawed, and staring right up at me. My heart once again pounded so hard I thought I would faint. As soon as she noticed me, she smiled this huge, impossible, wide ear-to-ear grin. She then shrieked that awful scream again and ran back into the woods. Needless to say, I didn't sleep after that. And that's why I'm here. If anyone has an idea of what the hell this lady is, as I know there's no way she's human, can someone please let me know? Maybe give me some advice on what to do here. Thanks in advance. My father died about 5 years ago, unexpectedly, from a heart attack. To say it was difficult on my mother and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog, Ace, on a move further south to a small town situated about half an hour from ATL. Just a few days before we were supposed to move, I had one of the most vivid dreams I ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture perfect of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if it was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the street lights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at the exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fading from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and hung in the light's reflection, as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me. In my dead father's voice, I'm sending something to watch you. Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I became terrified. I'm not sure why, and yet I managed to let out a small reply towards it. What? I whispered. The orb stayed silent for a few moments, leaving an eerie dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. Down, Black. I woke up almost instantly, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I'm not sure exactly what to make of it, especially those two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple of weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed south to Georgia. She had managed to find a little house for us, with only one or two neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods. It was a nice fit for us. The best reliever of all the stress that came with the move was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She actually helped me ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new home, I woke up suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One thing to know about our dog Ace, he has a condition in his trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping. He wasn't in the kitchen. He was nowhere to be found. I didn't check my mom's bedroom because I didn't want to wake her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he was in there anyways, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if it was from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woods, and realized I had forgot to close it. There it stood, slightly open. Shit, I thought to myself, he got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. Ace! Ace! I shouted into the trees. I heard another cough, and shined my light in its direction. This time it had echoed from down the gravel road. I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters. So I said, Ace, come on boy, home's this way buddy. That's when I heard it. The cough that I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound, and there stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed who she was. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat that I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and she let out the lowest growl I had ever heard. In that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to move her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to move her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more. But there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of that gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote, slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face. One of its eyes was strained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, hoping I was dreaming it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I heard this creature say two words in a low voice, "Down, Black." In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had ran through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down, almost as if nothing had happened. She rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal, loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before going upstairs. I made sure that the little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I'd done, I think I was almost a victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing that I would likely come to his aid. And for whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night. Maybe because that cat still likes to wander down the gravel road late at night. Or maybe that thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat. And you know the most ironic part of everything? That cat's name is Halloween. When I moved into this house a few months ago, I was in desperate need of a change of scenery. I spent the majority of my adult years since college living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment overlooking the busiest part of downtown Chicago. It was just a short walk to the station, and then from there, I could get to my office in under 20 minutes every morning. I enjoyed being around all my favorite food places, and having access to anything that I needed within walking distance. But what ended up getting me tired was the constant noise that came with living in a highly populated urban area. Once I had decided that I was sick and tired of the lonely city life, I immediately started saving my money for the down payment on a house in the suburbs, close enough that I could still drive to work, but far enough away from the city that I would likely never hear the police in the middle of the night ever again. Shortly after I had saved up what I considered to be a decent chunk of money, I found what I thought would be the perfect house for me. It was a little one-story model home that was in a subdivision that backs up to a forest wetland, known as the Lava Woods, for maximum privacy. I specifically chose a house at the very back of the neighborhood, on a street that had only recently been developed. There was only 2 or 3 other finished houses on the road, but mine was the only one at the very end of the street, backing up to a densely wooded area. The moving process happened quickly, and before I knew it, I was moved into my new place. After a week or two, I had transitioned into the slower pace of the suburban life, and was surprised to realize that I had actually become somewhat lonely without neighbors in my area. I would often find myself taking long walks around the neighborhood, and I would sometimes wander around for an hour or two on my days off just to see other people walking their dogs or taking a stroll with their families. On this one day, I had taken one of my strolls and was turning down my street to make my way home. My attention was drawn to the sound of meowing coming from a bush off to the side of the road. I approached the bush and knelt down, shining the flashlight on my cell phone into the lower branches to see if I could pinpoint the source of the sound. The light reflected off 2 small eyes in the underbrush. With a powerful meow, a small orange tabby cat came trotting out of the bush to greet me. I chuckled to myself and jokingly asked the cat where he had come from as he began to brush up against my legs. I knelt down, patting the little guy's ears and wondering if he had belonged to someone in the area. He was far too friendly and social to be a feral cat, so I assumed that he belonged to a family nearby. He was still fairly young, maybe a year old or so, but he didn't have a collar. So I picked him up in my arms and knocked on the door of the nearest houses, asking them if they had lost a cat. None of them had ever seen him before, so I decided to keep him at my house for the night. It was already pretty late, so I wouldn't be able to get him to a vet to check for a microchip until the next day. I gave him a bath by wiping him down with damp paper towels and fed him some of the lunch meat I had in my fridge. He made himself right at home in my house, and for the very first time since moving out here, I didn't feel quite as lonely. In fact, a part of me dreaded taking him to the vet in the morning and possibly finding out that he actually has a family that he would be needed to be returned to. But if it were my missing pet, I would want someone to let me know if they had found them. So I determined that no matter what, I would take him to the vet tomorrow morning and have them check for a microchip. For the rest of the evening, I enjoyed having the little guy curled up next to me on the couch while I caught up on reruns of Scrubs and ate my TV dinner. The next morning, I loaded him up in the car and took him to the nearest vet. I explained that I found him on the side of the road and that he seemed far too comfortable around humans to have been a feral cat. The vet agreed with me and began to scan him for a microchip. After about 30 seconds, she shook her head and informed me that he wasn't actually chipped. She explained that normally, people who want to dump their animals off will drop them off inside subdivisions, hoping that someone else will find them and take them in, so that they don't have to be responsible for them anymore. The thought of someone just abandoning such a sweet animal broke my heart, and without even thinking, I asked the vet if it would be okay if I took him home, since he didn't have a microchip. She laughed and told me that as far as they were concerned, the cat already belonged to me. I thanked her and told her that I wanted to get all the shots done while I was here, and asked if I could pick out a collar and some food from the waiting room. She told me that I was welcome to and asked me what name to add to my little buddy's file. Almost instantly, I told her his name was Max. I didn't even have to think about it, and from the moment that I first laid eyes on him, I knew his name was going to be Max. After the vet finished his checkup and shot, they handed Max back to me in a cardboard cat carrier. I peeked inside of the box to see that they had put the collar on him that I had picked out. A small green collar with a bow tie and a bell right below his chin. I loaded all of Max's new belongings into the car, and the two of us made our way home. The following weeks would be some of the happiest weeks of my life. Max preferred to spend his days outside when I was working, and then at the end of the day, I would come to the back door and see him coming out of the woods, ready to come inside and spend the night at the foot of my bed. We had a routine that we follow every single night, so it came as quite a surprise when a week or so ago, I came home to find Max already sitting at the back door, pacing back and forth, looking rather agitated. I turned the handle and he quickly pushed his way inside before I even had a chance to open the door all the way. His fur was standing on end, and he ran past me down the hallway into my bedroom without even looking back, the bell on his collar jingling the whole time. I chuckled at his strange behavior. I figured that he had probably seen a deer or something in the woods and had gotten scared. I didn't think much of it until I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of him growling at the back door. When I turned on the light and made it to the end of the hallway, I could see the outline of Max's arched back and poofy fur as he stared out into the dark woods and continued to growl. I called out to him and tried to calm him down, flipping the switch by the door to turn on the lights outside to show him that nothing was there. His eyes remained fixed on the tree line, as if he was seeing something deeper within the trees beyond my own sight. The sound of the bell on his collar jingling as he turned and sprinted back down the hallway to my bedroom. I knew that it wasn't unheard of to have a mountain lion or a coyote come through these less developed areas, and I figured that he had probably seen something further back than I had. I thought to myself that I should keep him inside for the next couple of days, just to be safe, you know. Then I turned and followed him back to the bedroom, closing the door behind me so that he wouldn't wander back to the back door and get himself worked up again. But I couldn't keep the bedroom door closed every night because his litter box was in the laundry room. So for the following few nights, I would find myself awoken to the familiar sound of Max being worked up and growling outside my bedroom. Each time, I would turn on the light to show him that there was nothing there, and he would sprint back to the bedroom his little bell jingling the entire way. After nearly an entire week of this behavior, I called the vet to see if I should bring him in for a visit. The vet told me that he had probably just had an encounter with a wild animal, and it had given him some anxiety about the woods behind my house. I agreed, and we continued with our routine. However, tonight, I woke up to the sound that I had become accustomed to of Max being worked up and growling outside my bedroom. I sighed and began to make my way out there to calm him down. So numb to the occurrence that I didn't even bother turning on the hallway light. Half awake, I rubbed my eyes and called out to Max, telling him that it was okay to come back to bed. As I reached out for the switch to turn on the outside light, that's when I noticed that the back door was slightly open, and it wasn't actually closed at all. My stomach dropped as I stared at the open door, and then I snapped back into reality for a moment. Cold sweat broke out into my forehead as I recognized the familiar sound of Max's bell coming up from behind me in the darkened hallway. Stricken with fear, I turned to see the familiar silhouette of Max's arched back and fluffy tail standing in the hallway behind me. I must have walked past him. It didn't even take long for me to realize that I was still hearing the sound of Max growling. But this time, he wasn't staring at the back door. He was staring into the darkness of my bedroom. My throat closed as my heart pounded as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. And for the first time, I could see what Max was growling at all this time. Just beyond the doorway, standing off to the side of my bed, in the corner of my room, was the silhouette of a grotesque creature staring back down the hallway at me. Its limbs seemed to change in unnatural ways. Long stringy white hair clung to its scalp, and beady black eyes locked with mine. Paralyzed, I heard the sound of Max's bell as he turned and began to run towards me in the back door, a sound that indicated that I should do the same. I turned and picked up Max in my arms as I ran out the back door, never looking back to see if I was being pursued. I ran down the road to the neighbor's house, and I asked to use their phone to call the police. Sometime later, they came to investigate the house. They never found evidence of anyone inside, but they did confirm that the back door had been forced open by something outside. I don't know what to think about what happened to the two of us, but I think that starting today, Max and I are gonna start to look for somewhere else to live. As a teenager, I would visit my grandma at her home on the Navajo Rest for several weeks every summer. I loved spending time with her, her delicious fried bread, and listening to her tell us stories. Every so often, my grandma would hire a worker, the harmless town drunk, to do jobs around her house and property. One evening, right before the sun went down, I was asked by my grandma to take him home, which was about 4 miles out of the valley where she lived. I was more than happy to, seeing that I was only 14 years old, and I was asked to drive a truck. Mind you, on the rest, nobody cares that you're only 14 years old and driving around. Rarely anyone is around to see you anyways. So my 9-year-old brother jumped in the truck cab with me, while this worker and my dog shared the tailgate of the truck, and then off we went. After I dropped the worker off at the shack that he and his brothers called the house, we headed back down the road to Grandma's. As I mentioned before, it was evening, and the sky was a deep red as the sun began to set behind us. We were leaving a nice dust trail from the dirt road, and the radio was playing music from the only radio station that could be picked up from the nearest town. There was nothing strange, nothing weird. But it was at this time that I caught movement of something in the bushes, a little up the road to the right of us. I remember slowing down, thinking that it was one of the many free-roaming sheep in the area that would sometimes dart out in front of the truck. As I passed where I thought I saw it, I sped up, thinking nothing else of it. Then, out of nowhere, I just felt this dark feeling of fear and dread. I had no idea why I was feeling this way, but I definitely felt that something was wrong. Even now as I replay this memory in my mind, there's only a few clear memories that I have of that evening. I remember looking in my rear view mirror and seeing the dark silhouette of something very tall and very skinny that seemed to be covered with some kind of hair or fur running behind the truck after us. Whatever it wasn't a normal human or even human at all. I remember hearing my brother crying and my dog barking at whatever was chasing us. I remember speeding very fast and shaking as the truck was bouncing on the dirt road. I remember that this thing was only getting closer as my brother cried out, "It's coming up on your side." I remember being scared as hell and thinking that I didn't want to die at the moment that I thought would be our last. I remember speeding around a bend in the road and seeing a car coming towards us in the opposite direction. At that moment, I felt instant relief and felt that whatever was following us was gone. Shaken up, but alive, we made it to Grandma's house. Wondering what the hell had just happened, we ran inside, not looking back, hoping that whatever was chasing us had not followed us home. As we told my grandma about our experience, she didn't seem too surprised, which actually surprised us. She continued by repeating stories that we had already heard at one point or another about black magic, witches, and something that the Navajos called Yinadroshi, or skinwalkers. Needless to say, I didn't even want to look out of any windows for the rest of the night. As a matter of fact, I never drove on the rest at night again until I was 21 years old. It all started around November of last year in Washington State. New to the area, I like the woods, so a few friends of mine decided to take me out to a secluded spot. I mean, I needed some time away from work anyways, so I got the weekend off. I packed my bag, cleaned the rifle, and I headed over to my friend's house. We ended up about 25 to 30 miles away from the Canadian border, in this forest that seemed to go on forever. I was really digging it because my home state didn't have anything like this. So there were 6 of us and 2 dogs. Each person also had a hunting rifle or a shotgun with a handgun, except for me. We parked our cars on this tiny game warden or border patrol dirt road, and we ended up hiking about 4 miles into the woods. By this time, it was already starting to get a little bit dark, so we decided to build a fire to set up tents. 2 of the group and 1 of the dogs went out to gather wood, while the rest of us started setting up the tent. It was one of those huge 8-person ones. November does get cold up there, so the tent was set up in about 15 minutes. The trio still hadn't returned, but it was getting dark, so we decided to build a fire with branches from around the site. That's when we started hearing crashing noises coming towards us, as if someone was running at us full speed. The 2 guys came barreling through, with their eyes wide open. The dog was nowhere to be seen. They started talking about seeing one of the other guys acting weird in the woods, so they were trying to approach him, and every time they got close, he would move away. They said that at one point, he disappeared and then popped up not 10 feet behind them. They also mentioned a really bad smell, that of rotten meat and spoiled milk. We tried to ask what was happening, but there was no answer. Then, apparently, the guy took off, sprinting into the woods, and the dog chased after him, barking. The 2 guys then took off after the dog and the missing guy. They lost both of them pretty soon, and the smell started disappearing as well. They then heard a weird screeching sound in the distance, followed by a loud scream from the dog. Then, they said that the smell came back, and that's when they returned to camp in a hurry. We were all weirded out but still thought that it was just a prank. I suggested that it might be a joke, and I got yelled at. They then started asking, well, where the hell is the dog then? It was a good point. By this time, the sun was on its way down, so we started building up a fire, and we made sure our motion sensor lights were working and set up the tents. About 15 minutes after dark, the remaining dog started growling aggressively. Then, this weird smell came, and it was making most of us nauseous. We started hearing strange noises, branches cracking, and leaves rustling all around the perimeter of our camp. At this point, the dog was going crazy, and one of the guys with a shotgun, we'll call him Greg, stood up and fired off 3 rounds of buckshot into the woods. A screech came from the woods, moving away from us at high speed, and the smell also went away. We waited about an hour and decided to try to get some sleep, with 2 people staying up and standing guard at all times. My turn being the guard came up, along with another guy named Victor. We were outside with the dog, and 2 hours went by without incident. After us, Greg and Tom took over. I went inside the tent to sleep for a while, and then I woke up to that terrible smell and the sound of Greg yelling, so I got up and went outside. Greg was searching the edge of the woods with a spotlight, calling out Tom's name. I asked what happened, and they explained that they were sitting there when they heard one of the guys from earlier calling out from the trees. The dog started growling, and Tom rushed off to follow the dog, which had actually gone into the woods. Tom went after the dog, but they lost sight of him. We followed Tom's tracks for a while, but lost him when they just stopped, with no other footprints leading back the way he came. That's when we heard Tom's voice calling for help from the woods. However, it was off-key, and he would burst into giggles now and then. So we started building up the fire again and sat around it, with everybody holding lights, and all of us holding weapons in hand. About 15 minutes after Tom had disappeared, the smell returned. It returned, but it was stronger than ever. We heard gibbering and giggling in the distance, and the forest seemed to come alive with strange noises. Suddenly, the voice of Tom came from the woods, calling us to come help him, but it sounded all wrong, and every now and then, he would start giggling. So we decided to put the fire out, pack all of our stuff, and head back to the vehicles. As we reached the cars, that's when we found the 2 dogs. One of them was impaled on a snapped pine tree, and the other with its neck snapped and twisted around. That's when we heard the giggling again, and the smell returned, stronger than ever. We got into the cars and drove away, not even talking about it. Most of us never even admitted that this happened, but one of the guys later told me that he had seen Tom at the edge of the woods, just staring at us as we were leaving, with a creepy grin on his face. I actually believe him, and I know that I'll never go camping that far away again. I lived alone in this house for the past year, and up until now, I haven't had any issues. I had first moved into the small town in the middle of the Midwest a year ago after my job had to relocate me. I'm a factory manager, and I oversee the daily operations of a newly built factory on the outskirts of town. The moving part sucked, but once I was finally moved in, I would take a moment to view my surroundings, and I was fascinated. I was never much of a nature guy. I spent most of my youth in a major city, but seeing all the towering trees that wrapped around the entire town, like a protection barrier that made me feel safe, the intimidating mountains that formed the backdrop of our town were also very impressive. They gave the horizon character. It was truly a sight to behold. After around 10 months of living here, my company was opening up a new plant, and they asked if I could go oversee operations once again. However, this time, I declined. I asked if I could stay as the permanent manager of this location. They did mention a slight pay difference, but I didn't mind. Over the past year, everything was perfect. I would wake up at around 6 a.m., do my daily morning ritual, stop by the local cafe, which gave the best coffee on the planet, and be at work by 8. My job at the factory was quite simple. I was basically a babysitter. I dealt with discrepancies, did paperwork, checked in with my supervisors, and finally headed home around 6 p.m. My job probably sounds very tedious and boring to a lot of you, but I still enjoyed it. Plus, even with a pay cut, I was still making a pretty decent salary. I'm sure most of you aren't here to listen to me talk about my job or this town. However, at the beginning of last month, I saw something out in my backyard. The way my house is set up, my backyard butts right up to the surrounding tree line that surrounds this town. I had just gotten home from my job and was lying in bed, watching TV until around 10 p.m. When I finally got ready to go to sleep, I turned off the TV and also my nightstand lamp. I had rolled over and was facing my bedroom window, which pointed directly out into my backyard. It had snowed a few days prior, so my entire backyard had a thin layer of untouched snow. I was staring out the window, letting my mind wander as I was beginning to drift off to a peaceful slumber, when I saw the flash of something near the tree line. Seeing whatever it was made my mind refocus itself as I started to scan the trees outside. Not even 5 minutes later, I saw them. 2 eyes were shining in the tree line, reflecting light from some unknown source. They would bob up and down for a moment before stopping and staring at my house. They would then turn to the right or left, disappear for a minute or two, then reappear at a different spot. At first, I thought it must have been a wolf, or maybe some other nocturnal creature looking for food. I put it out of my thoughts and fell asleep. For the entire week straight, those eyes had basically become a routine for me, as they started to appear every night in the same exact spot. I would lie awake and watch them intently. I thought that maybe perhaps the area in the trees was some sort of natural grazing spot, that whatever animal this was had become accustomed to eating here every night. I watched as the eyes walked left to right, disappeared, and reappeared until my tired eyes could no longer stay open. At the end of the first week, something happened. I had just finished turning off the TV and had rolled over to wait for the animal to arrive. A half hour passed, and I was just about to go to sleep when the eyes reappeared. The eyes shined brightly in between the dark trees. After a few moments, the eyes seemed to get closer to my house. They were faintly growing in the distance. Then, once it crossed into the threshold into my backyard, my motion sensor lights I had set up on the back of my house went off. My eyes shot wide open, and I felt my heart rate slowly start to increase as I saw what was standing in my backyard. It looked like a man. Well, almost a man, who was hunched over on all fours like a dog. Its skin was bluish gray, and stringy black hair clung to its scalp, like the legs of a spider. Its eyes were massive, taking up most of its face. The sudden bright light caused it to raise a hand to shield its eyes. Its fingers were disturbingly long, like bony sticks, hovering over its face. The thing fell back and scrambled into the dark trees. After watching this event unfold, there was no way I was going to go back to bed after that. I got up from my bed and looked around my backyard. A few moments later, The motion sensor lights diminished. I continued scanning the trees for any sign of this creature, but it was gone. I spent the rest of the night trying to find any information I could on what I had seen. I looked around at countless websites, putting the description of what I saw. Most of them spoke of a ghost and demons, but this didn't seem like a demon to me. It looked like a very real thing in my backyard. There's even other websites that mention various creatures that have some similar traits and features as what I saw in my backyard. The following week I watched every window every single night in case it came back. But every single night, I was met with nothing. I was starting to think that what I saw wasn't even real, that I had fallen asleep while watching the trees, and that my own mind had crafted this vivid nightmare. At the beginning of last week, however, I realized it wasn't a nightmare. It was very real. I was heading to bed a little bit later than I normally would, and as I lay there, I began watching through my window. I wasn't watching as intently as I was from the previous week. Then, after one long blink, it appeared, and this time, I felt my heart thumping in my chest so hard that I thought it was going to stop at any moment. I could feel the air beginning to steam my eyes, as I hadn't shut them for 2 minutes straight. The reason I was so unnerved was that the creature was lowering its head from directly above the outside of my window. The roof of my house was still a fair distance from the top of my window, so that meant that this creature was somehow clinging to the outside of my house like a spider on a web. It stared into my window at me. Our eyes were locking in place like if we had some staring contest. I was wondering why my motion sensor lights hadn't gone off at all, but that thought quickly left my mind as I saw the creature reach its hand towards the glass. It began raking its sharp, jagged fingernails along the glass over and over again. The sound that was produced from digging its fingers into the glass, it's embarrassing to admit, but I was scared at this point, too scared to think and too scared to move. It pulled its hand away from the window, and with a quick swing, it shattered the glass into pieces. When it did this, I fell back out of bed and onto the floor. I wanted to get up to run out of there, screaming my head off, but I couldn't seem to take my eyes off this creature. It slithered its way through the broken window and crawled along the inside of my wall. It then stopped once it reached the corner of my bedroom and just stared at me. Its mouth began to crack open as if it hadn't opened its mouth for some time. Broken, sharp rotted teeth filled its mouth as it seemed to smile at me. A slight feeling of disgust began to form with an overwhelming fear that gripped me. In one rapid movement, the creature lunged from the wall of my bedroom over to me. It grabbed at me with its long fingers while its mouth was snapping in my face. I could truly sense that this creature was trying to kill me, or possibly even eat me. The commotion caused the lamp on my nightstand to topple over. I managed to switch it on with one hand, while my other hand held the creature at bay. The sudden light seemed to blind the creature briefly, and in that moment, I brought the lamp crashing down onto its head as hard as I could. It slumped over onto its side, and I shoved it off of me. I quickly got up, left the room, and called the police. I explained that a wild animal or something had broken into my house. They arrived shortly after, and I led them through my house into my bedroom. But when I opened my bedroom door, the creature was gone. They examined my broken window and realized that I was actually telling the truth, even though when they asked me to describe what kind of animal it was, I stopped myself from telling them that it was a monster. I told them that I was sleeping and that it was too dark for me to see what it was. They nodded and told me to call them if it ever comes back. That was the beginning of last week. and I have since repaired my window and made sure that my motion sensor lights are working. I'm not sure what that creature actually was. Maybe some of you out there have more experience with this and can let me know. But as for me, well, I think I'm gonna actually contact the higher ups in my company, and I'm gonna ask them if that new manager position is still available. If it is, then I'll be more than happy to leave this place. In the 1980s, when I was around 7 or 8 years old, my dad's father died. He lost a long-fought battle against cancer. I hate to say it like this, but I remember my family feeling relieved. The stress and pain my grandfather suffered was finally over. Now, my grandfather had been a man who saved his money, but never came around to spending it. And as my grandmother had long since passed, my father received everything from his father's will. My family received over $60,000 in the will, and after some time planning with my mother, my dad decided to put it towards his dream house. He wanted to return to the country lifestyle he grew up in. He thought the fields and woods would be a better place to raise my older brother and me. Soon, my parents bought a beautiful ranch-style home with 80 acres of land, much of which still had to be financed. But what they did receive from the will did cover most of it. I remember when I first walked through the doorway of the new home, it smelled like it was well-kept wood, the smell of freshly cut grass coming from the front door. My mother left it up to my brother and me to decide between ourselves which room belonged to each of us. This would be the first time having a room to myself. I was so excited that I didn't even care which room my brother picked. I do now wish, though, that I would have cared. I ended up with the room furthest away from my parents' room. This room was sizable, with 2 windows overlooking the fields outside. It also had a big closet that I had no idea what to do with. Lots of space for a boy who kept his clothes in a dresser. It was on the very first day there when strange occurrences began. Having told our parents which rooms we decided on, we started to unpack separately in our rooms. I was sitting in the back corner of the closet of my bedroom, figuring out how to stack my collection of board games, which were the only things I could think of to place in there at the time. I left my closet door open, as well as my bedroom door, so that the lights from the house and from outside would shine into the closet. The closet did have its own light source, one of those light bulbs with a pull string, but I had trouble reaching it, so I didn't even want to bother with it. I remember having just set down my Monopoly box when the closet door slammed shut. Instantly, I shot up and turned around. Without any light from the outside, the closet was pitch black. I called out my brother's name, assuming he was joking with me, but there was no reply. I ran towards the door, using the crack of light at the bottom as my guide. Then I looked around for the doorknob. I was relieved when I found it until I tried to turn it. It wouldn't move. It didn't make sense. The closet door didn't have a lock on the inside, or even on the outside of it. Why wouldn't it turn? As a scared kid, I could only assume my older brother was on the other side holding the doorknob still. We liked to joke with each other as all brothers do, but he had never been one to prank me like this. He was as much scared of the dark as I was. Moments after realizing that trying to open the door was pointless, I turned back towards the center of the closet. I reached my hand upwards, looking for the string to the light, or rather the feeling for it. It was difficult for me to reach out, but I knew if I could just feel the tip, I could jump up and pull it down, and the darkness would disappear. The longer I stepped blindly through the dark, the faster my heart was pounding. Being engulfed in darkness was a nightmare come true. Little did I know things would get worse. I did finally feel the small end of the string. Before I could jump up and try to pull the cord down, I felt something that took my breath away. An icy, cold hand from behind me. It placed itself on my neck and slowly ran up my cheek. I jumped and screamed so loud some of the blood vessels in my face busted. I practically tackled the wall next to me to get around the thing that had touched me. Quickly, I got towards the door and began to pound against it, screaming for anyone that might hear me. Moments later, my dad pulled the door open from the other side. I nearly fell on my face. I crawled out and quickly looked back into the closet. The darkness now cowered away from the light that flowed back through the open door. My dad picked me up and embraced me and looked at my face. Buddy, did you lock yourself in there? Jeez, look at your face. He wiped tears away from my red cheeks as he carried me to his and my mom's room to comfort me. I couldn't bring myself to tell him that the door didn't have a lock, but I was able to tell both of them what happened in there. But they blamed it on my intense fear of the dark. Specifically, my mom said, being that scared can make you see or feel things that aren't there, honey. She compared it to seeing figures or faces in the dark, when what you're actually looking at is a coat rack or a chair. As much as I love my parents, I didn't agree with what they said. The hand that I had felt was real, and I remember it clearly. Even now, that hand was not my own, nor was it my imagination. Later on, when Dad went to my closet one night to grab one of the board games, I watched him do a double take when he opened the door. It was the first time he had actually taken a look at it. My dad looked at the doorknob over on both sides and raised an eyebrow. "Hey, buddy," he said as he checked out the closet door. "If you go in here, make sure you don't close the door or you might get stuck in there again. There's no lock, so it's most likely just warped or something." I nodded and did my best to believe him. Over the next few months, small but weird and creepy things would happen, especially in that part of the house towards my room. Dirty clothes that I would lay on the bedroom floor would often end up in the closet floor the next morning. When I began closing the closet door every night, out of fear of the darn thing, it would always be open in the morning. One day, when I was out playing after I had cleaned my room, my mom called me back inside, absolutely furious. When I went back inside to my room where my mom was, she was upset because of how trashy my bedroom was. She thought I hadn't cleaned it, but the state it was suddenly in was worse than I had ever seen it before. Every drawer in my dresser had been pulled out and dumped out. My blanket and sheet from my bedroom had been pulled off and tossed over the closet door, which was now open. Inside the closet were hundreds of board game pieces, as someone had dumped each of the boxes out onto the floor. I was shocked, but no matter what I said to my mom, she wasn't having it. She demanded that I clean my room before I was allowed to come out of the room. Obviously, I was upset, but I did as she said. I cleaned as fast as I could, folded all my clothes again, remade my bed, then stood at the opening to my closet. I couldn't bring myself to walk in there alone, especially after something or someone had just ruined my room. And I knew it wasn't my brother because we had both been outside. Why would my parents mess up my room? Deep down, I knew it was the thing in the closet. I stayed in that room 2 hours longer than I had to, unwilling to enter that closet to pick up the board game pieces. But when my stomach began to growl and the smell of homemade fried chicken filled the air, I forced myself up and into the closet. It took me a few tries, but I was able to jump up and catch the stream to the light, so at least I would have some light if I did get stuck in there again. Quickly, I started to pick up the pieces on the floor. It was a pain matching them up with the right boxes, as about a dozen different games had been mixed up. Every few seconds, I glanced at the closet door, making sure it stayed open. I thought nothing could happen if the light was on. I was wrong. I picked up the final piece. Eventually, a small white ball. that I'm pretty sure belonged in the Hungry Hungry Hippos box. I threw it in, closed up the box, and turned around. I stopped. A woman stood in the doorway. Her feminine shape made me first think it was my mother, but she was taller than her. Her hair was a mess and went down to her ribs. She stood facing away from me in a stained but light blue dress. She appeared to be looking out the windows of my bedroom. My voice failed me. I wanted to speak to her, but I had no idea what to say. I wanted to think it was some long-lost relative coming for a visit that I had never met before, and that I didn't know she was coming. Denial is a powerful thing. The woman was breathing in and out so slowly that I didn't even hear her breathing until long after I studied her. Her breathing was extremely slow and troubled, as if she had been a smoker for multiple lifetimes. Then, she lifted a bony finger and pointed towards one of the windows. I swear, she spoke. I think she said, "Such a nice day." Out of nowhere, in the blink of an eye, my vision was obstructed. I flinched away, first thinking that I had suddenly gone blind. But as I brought my hands up towards my face, I found greasy, messy hair covering my small form. Then that slow, struggling breathing came from behind me. This woman was no longer in the doorway. She was standing right behind me, with her hair draped over me. I screamed, and then I ran. I ran where I last saw the open closet door. And Jesus, this sounds crazy, but the few feet I ran to escape that closet, each inch of the way, I was going through that hair. Her breathing stayed in the same spot in the closet, but the hair seemed infinite, as if it was no longer coming from her head, and instead hanging from the ceiling. Only when I bursted out of the closet did the hair finally come to an end. I turned to shut the door and found once again the closet empty. These are a couple of my most terrifying experiences with what I would eventually refer to as the Witch of Donner Farm. Donner was the name of one of the previous owners of the land. I wish I could tell you that I figured out who she was, that we ended up moving, and that it all stopped. But we didn't move, and it never did stop. It would happen randomly, and things might calm down for months at a time. But she was always there, seemingly preferring my side of the house. The experiences only stopped after I moved out at the age of 20. If you want to hear more of these experiences, let me know. I'm sure most of you won't believe me. I'm a 21-year-old Navajo. I have family that lives on a plot of land south of Gallup. It's about a 30-minute drive to my family's land, and it's surprisingly not deep in the woods. I remember first being in close proximity with a witch when I was about 7. I was at my uncle's house. Our land has 3 homes on it. His, my mom's, and his girlfriend. They were drinking, and my uncle went to relieve himself out the front door. I remember he freaked out and said there was a skinwalker outside. I freaked out, and his girlfriend said it was okay, that it was just Scooby-Doo, attempting to lessen my fear. Since it's been so long, I remember those important details only after that. I have no memory of what happened. That uncle passed away that year, and I always think about what could have been between me and him. Now that I feel so alone, and the rest of my family isn't amazing as he was with me. Anyways, to be clear, I have never seen a witch, but these details are unfortunately true. Jumping ahead a couple of years, I'm in 8th grade. My grandpa, who lived with my mom and me, is in the hospital. I ended up sleeping in his bedroom because I always slept on my mom's floor due to being creeped out by the thought of a witch trying to peer inside my window. or hearing the noises it could make. I wanted to sleep in there because he had cable in his room. His room is on the opposite end of the trailer where my mom slept. It's about 5 a.m. and I wake up to the most terrifying language I ever heard. It sounded like a cross between a hyena and a pig. The constant chit-chat between whatever was outside my grandpa's window haunted me in that instance. I listened for a couple of seconds, but I covered my ears as hard as I could out of fear. It was the most scared I ever been. After the whole ordeal, I went to my mom's room and crawled into her bed, telling her what happened and shaking a bit. I had school that morning, so when we went to start the car, I noticed in the area where I heard the noise, there was a trailer hitch, and sitting in it was a stray dog. My grandma then hired a medicine man after that happened, and he said that dog was in cahoots with the witches. I tried to get rid of him, but that dog always came back. It was Skinny. I always had a bad vibe from that dog, which doesn't happen as I love dogs. After that encounter, I was truly scared of being alone. A year later, during my freshman year of high school, my mom died. Whether or not those jealous witches were the cause of her death, I'll ponder once here and there. She died from a bad cold, mucus in her lungs. I was asleep in her bedroom, but not on her bed. I went to bed around 10 p.m., and in the morning, she was very weak and cold, like she was hallucinating and didn't get under the blankets to keep warm. When I woke up, she was dead and sitting in front of her bed. That day changed my life completely, as I have never stayed at that house ever since she died. I stay with my dad now in town. My other grandpa said our family may be an active target of those evil witches. He said once in the 90s, when my uncles and their friends were at my grandma's land, they saw a fire and a witch doing a dance ritual on top of a mesa. They began to shoot at it. It sees them, and they take off when their girlfriends freak out. They leave, and the witch follows them from wherever they are. Keep in mind, this area has a lot of trees and isn't flat, like most of the Navajo Nation. My grandpa said that the witch followed my uncles back to where my family's land is. My family and the evil history of the area they settle at is real. I wouldn't type all this if it wasn't true. I don't like fake paranormal stories, and you wouldn't either if the paranormal was just a footstep away. After all the harm these witches have done, no one wants to talk about it or do anything about them. What is there to do? It's been 6 years now since my mom died. We saw what happened when my family interfered with this ritual and what ended up happening to all of them. So there are things out there that are just best left alone. I love summer. It's my favorite time of the year. I know some people prefer a different season, and those other ones are great too. But for me, there's just something relaxing about a warm summer day. Almost every year or so, a few of my friends and I have a little get together. We all take some time off from work and plan some sort of event. Last year was Eric's world famous barbecue party. Everything was great until Eric set a stack of paper plates on fire, and those blew into the various table covers we had arranged. We managed to curtail the fires before they had time to spread any further, but that didn't stop the fire department from showing up anyway. The year before that, Jimmy invited us over to his house for a pool party. He has a very nice in-ground pool, but none of us actually swam in it. We mostly just hung around his mini bar, just drinking and chatting away. Nothing outrageous happened during that party, except for Eric's failed cannonball attempt. I could go on and on about all the events we experienced in the past, but I'm here to talk about what happened during my event last month. Like I mentioned previously,
We had all taken some time off work, and it was my turn to decide what we would all do. We usually didn't take turns choosing like this, but no one seemed to come up with a different plan. I had been browsing through different destination spots and activities around my area. After searching for around an hour or two, I stumbled across a rather interesting post. Someone was renting out a lake house about an hour's drive north. Looking through the photos and glancing over the price, I knew right away this is what I wanted to do. I called the place and I got it rented out for the weekend. The woman on the phone sounded very excited about me renting the property. After finalizing everything, I called everyone else and told them my plan. They were all almost as excited as the woman. Eric wanted to bring his grill with him so he could barbecue one day. And Jimmy brought some fishing gear so we could lounge by the lake. Our other friend Peter tagged along with us as well. He isn't a very outdoors type of person, but he still offered to come with us. We each arrived at the lake house about mid-afternoon. The sun wasn't quite setting yet, which was good as it gave us a bit of time to survey the area and inspect the house itself. The house was much larger than I expected for the price I paid to rent it. It seemed like I had gotten a really good deal. It was between the massive lake and the crowded woods behind it. Only a solitary dirt trail cuts through the tree line, leading to and from the house itself. Eric was already unloading his grill not 5 minutes after he arrived, while Jimmy, Peter, and I entered the house. The inside of the house was very rustic, but I knew this much from the photos. Different types of mounted animals on the high walls. The living room area was quite large. It looked almost like a recreation hall. A wooden staircase wrapped along one edge, leading up to multiple bedrooms. An expansive kitchen took up the other half of the bottom floor, as well as a decent-sized bathroom. It looked like this place was designed for big groups of people to just enjoy and have fun. After exploring the house for a bit, I went outside and took in the surroundings. It was such a peaceful evening as I stood there taking in the fresh air. That's when I noticed something strange. Apart from Eric trying to mess around with his grill, there was no sound coming from the forest. I couldn't hear any birds, animals, or even insects. I could barely hear the sound from the lake nearby. Even though it was weird, I tried not to think too much of it. An hour or so passed by, and after eating some burnt steaks that Eric so graciously made for us, we each retired to our bedrooms. Sleeping in a new place always made me feel a bit nervous. I may be the only one, but whenever I stay in a hotel or at a friend's place, it always takes me forever to fall asleep, at least during the first night. This isn't really a major issue, as it doesn't keep me from traveling. The bedrooms were quite nice, minimal, yet decent. They had a small wooden frame bed, a style dresser, and a nightstand with a small lamp. And on the far wall was a long window that overlooked the trees and the lake. I was lying there, letting my mind wander as my eyes danced around my room. I wasn't even staring at anything. I was just trying to take in my surroundings so I could fall asleep more easily next time. Minutes slowly ticked by, and I started to feel my eyelids close before a faint of movement out of the corner of my eye caused me to open them once again. I couldn't be sure, but I thought for a split second I saw someone standing outside my window. But that couldn't be possible, as the bedrooms were on the second floor, and it was a straight drop down to the dirt below. My eyes locked onto the window, but after focusing for a bit, there was nothing out there. The next day, we all got up bright and early. There wasn't a whole lot to do aside from wandering around the property, so that's what I did. Eric was already prepping some food, while Pete and Jimmy had started day drinking. I stood outside the wooden porch with a cup of coffee, looking out to the tree line nearby. I once again let my eyes drift around as I sipped my coffee, and once again, There wasn't any sound, which I still thought was strange. I wonder why it was so quiet in the woods, a place that is often filled with the sounds of life. As my eyes drifted, I spotted a bit of movement in the distance. It looked like something large, moving quickly through the trees. I thought it might have been a bear, but before I could adjust my gaze, whatever it was had disappeared further into the trees. The rest of the day was uneventful. We spent most of the time down near the lake, drinking and fishing. Eric had made us some burgers, which actually weren't terrible, and before we knew it, the sun had faded. We all went to our bedrooms for the night, and I didn't have much trouble falling asleep this time around. 10 minutes after I had drifted off, I was startled awake by the sounds of screaming. My eyes cracked open and I sat up, looking around in the darkness. It took me a minute to recognize the voice. It was Jimmy. As I opened my bedroom door, I saw Eric opening his as well. We each gave each other a confused look before going to Jimmy's door and knocking. After receiving no answer, I opened his door. "Jimmy?" I called out. Jimmy was sitting on the floor, wide-eyed, covered in sweat. I asked him what was wrong. However, he wouldn't turn to look at me. His eyes seemed to be fixed on something else. Eric and I both glanced over in unison towards his window, and that's when I heard Eric, over my shoulder, shout, "What the fuck is that?" I didn't say anything. I just felt my muscles tighten. On the other side of Jimmy's window was a figure. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. With the faint bit of moonlight outside, I could just barely see its face. I know this is gonna sound very weird, but its face was almost dog-like in appearance. It had a long nose and beady, hollow eyes. From what I could tell, its body was completely hairless. Not sure if it was just the moonlight outside or what, but its skin was a dark gray color with a bluish tint to it. Its eyes continuously darted from each of us, almost like someone hopped up on caffeine. It was creepy how jittery this thing was. It felt like an eternity for all of us sitting there, watching this thing watch us. Then, it started to descend from the window. Jimmy and Eric didn't move a muscle, yet for some reason, I felt drawn to the window. I peered outside and I saw it. Despite its massive size, it crawled down the side of the house like a spider. It crawled on all fours as it made its way to the ground below. Its hands were strangely human in appearance, but its hind legs were those of an animal, like a dog or maybe a wolf. Its head turned back to look up at the house, and I could just faintly see its beady eyes, darting around before it took off into the woods, disappearing beyond the darkened tree line. Eric, Jimmy, and I all sat there, staring at each other for a few moments before Peter came stumbling into the room, asking what the hell was going on. None of us said anything, but we all did end up sleeping in the same bedroom for the rest of the evening. The following day, as we all packed up to leave, I couldn't help but stare at the strange footprints in the dirt, leading off into the forest. What made me nervous wasn't the fact that these footprints confirmed that what we saw that night was real, but there were at least 10 more identical yet separate tracks, leading off in various directions. It's been close to a month since that, and I've been trying my best to forget about the whole event. I still have no idea what that thing was, but I doubt I'll be renting any more houses by a forest.
This is my true Skinwalker story. At the time of this experience, I had no knowledge, nor had I ever heard about a Skinwalker. I was 19 years old, and I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, with my parents while attending community college. My sister-in-law had asked me to go with her to Tuba City, Arizona, to visit with her mother and pick up some papers. Her mother was a school teacher there on the Navajo res. We would be staying there overnight. Her mother lived in one of those small government houses on the res. There were about 3 or 4 houses near her on a small paved street, except for a few buildings near there. It was pretty isolated. My niece and nephew were with us, and we'll call my sister-in-law Mary, my nephew Mike, and my niece Amy. Mike was only 10 years old, and Amy was 9. It was early evening when we arrived in Tuba City. We had stopped at a fast food restaurant on the way to pick up dinner to go. After arriving at the house, we all laid together at a small kitchen table. We talked and visited a while before going into the small living room to watch TV. There wasn't a lot to do there, so Mary and I decided we would take a night drive and explore around the res. I know what you're thinking. It's a very bad idea, or a stupid idea. We drove around for about an hour and a half. Surprisingly, nothing weird happened. We were just laughing, talking, and listening to music as we drove up and down the dirt roads. After a while, we decided to head back. When arriving back home, we stayed up a little bit later, and then we decided it was time to go to bed. I slept in a small back bedroom on a twin bed next to a window with blinds. My nephew Mike slept on the floor in a sleeping bag in the same room. Mary and Amy were in the other room down the hallway. During the night, I was awakened by some strange, scratchy noises outside the window by my bed. It sounded like something was making long, slow clawing sounds down the window, like when someone runs their nails down a chalkboard. I am a light sleeper, so this of course woke me up. I whispered out loud to my nephew Mike to wake up, asking him if he was hearing the same thing I was. Mike was sleepy and groggy, being awakened from a deep slumber, so he seemed confused at first. I asked him again if he had heard the scratching noise, but he didn't answer. He was just out of it. He then laid back down and was out like a light. I was perplexed and a little scared. I thought to myself maybe it was just a stray cat or dog, but I couldn't figure it out. I did, however, have no indication to look out that window, so I just lay there listening. After a few minutes, the clawing stopped. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I mentioned this at the kitchen table during breakfast, but no one seemed very interested. We left later that afternoon, and I never even thought about it again. 6 months later, I was attending one of my college courses. The teacher was lecturing us about different legends and stories of the Navajo people. He touched on the stories of evil medicine men, or witches, that are called skinwalkers. He began telling us that they are very dangerous and harmful. They have the ability to turn into or disguise themselves as any animal. They could take the form of a coyote, wolf, or even a bear. They also been known to follow people home at night. That's why you should never be out on the res after dark. You're never supposed to make eye contact with the skinwalker, because they can actually possess your soul. You should never talk about them, because you can draw them to you. They can cause issues and bring evil into your life. An icy chill went down my spine. I remember that night I had spent on the res. I wonder if a skinwalker had followed Mary and me home that night after our drive. The realization that a skinwalker had targeted us fills me with fear. I think of this often, and I'm so glad I didn't look out the window that night. I'm also haunted by the fact that there was just a very thin pane of glass separating me from such an evil thing. And now, I guess I know why no one in the family wanted to talk about it. The year was 2004 in South California. I was 16 years old, Native American, Navajo. My grandmother was a medicine woman at such a young age.
She was in the process of teaching me her ways. When I was a child, she always told me not to be afraid of anything I might see, and that I was special. Ever since then, it was like a gate opened in me, and I began to see things, and feel them sometimes, cries and screams like whispers in my ears. This causes me to have to wear earbuds to sleep, playing some music in order to drown out everything, and just sleep. I've been through a lot of hauntings as I was a kid, until this day in 2021, but this haunting was one that has upset me, as something attacked my mother. One day, my mother came to me, and I could see she looked so drained, like she hadn't gotten good sleep in a long time. I asked her what was wrong, when I noticed that she didn't seem scared. She said to me, "I'm terrified to sleep. Every night, I awake, and I can't move at all. And then all of a sudden, I see something dark, slowly crawling from the edge of the bed by my feet, climbing up my legs all the way to me. All I can do was cry. I feel hands on my neck starting to choke me. I try to move to wake up your dad, but nothing happens. I kept my eyes on her, listening to her story to hear every word. I am no stranger to the supernatural, and I know ways to keep things away. This angered me, that something in my family's home was hurting my mother. I tried to calm her down and assure her she would be okay. Mom, come sleep in my room tonight. I'll stay up and watch you as you sleep, and I'll see if I can catch it. I have a little dog named Princess. She was a very good dog. She would sleep with me in my room, and she would always growl when she felt danger, tangible or supernatural. Through the night, she would keep watching me all the time, and she made me feel safe. That night, my mother came into my room, laid down the bed, and I told her to sleep, reminding her that I would be here so that she doesn't have to worry about anything. It was around 10 p.m., and she finally fell fast asleep. I stayed up right next to her with my dog in the middle of us. The dog soon fell asleep too, and at around 2 a.m., nothing had yet happened. So I got up to use the bathroom. As I was coming out of the bathroom, I looked at my bedroom door, which I kept open just in case, and that's when a dark shape ran past inside. In my head, I thought, well, here we go. I walked back into my room and closed the door behind me. I laid on the bed and waited for anything to happen. Before long, I was getting bored since nothing was happening. I lay on my stomach with my hand holding my head. I let out a long breath. I folded my hands and I laid my head on them, facing away from the door. Not even 1 second passed and I heard my door open. I had a quick conversation in my head, and it was something like this. Did something wake you up? Maybe my little brother. He must have woken up. As I was saying this in my head, I felt like someone was shaking the bed, but only by our heads. They were shaking it in a way as if they were testing to see if a person was awake. I said again in my head, it must be my little brother. I better get up to see if he's okay. But when I tried to move, I couldn't at all. My head, my hands, I was completely frozen. The moment I noticed I couldn't move, I began to feel something climbing on the bed and on top of my mother. My heart began to pound, and I was thinking of what I could do. I felt something like a leg on the side of me from this thing that was on my mom. The bed felt like it was sinking in the middle, and whatever this was had its foot on my dog. My dog didn't even bother moving. It didn't make a noise this whole time. I thought in my head saying I had to do something. I need to think. At that moment, my side began to feel like it was on fire. It hurt so bad, making me lose focus on trying to think. But I pushed through. I ended up facing my fears and panics, and also became committed to prayer. But I couldn't believe it. I couldn't remember any prayers at the moment. I couldn't even make one up. I was blocked. So I looked at my hand that was close to my face, and I tried to focus on it. saying in my head, "Open your hands. Just open it." I tried and tried, but nothing was happening. I kept saying it over and over. It felt like hours now, but I needed to fight this and save my mom from this evil spirit. But then I felt the top of my fingers. I took that and began to try and open my hand fully and slowly. I could feel it moving as I felt my hand open just a bit. This thing jumped off my bed and ran out of the room. I heard my bedroom door slam shut, and I could finally fully move again. I looked at my mom, and she was okay with it. I let out a sigh of relief, and tears just started flowing again. My mom woke up asking what happened and why I was crying like that. So I told her, "Let's get the fuck out of here." So she and I went to the living room, and I told her everything that happened. After that, she looked so scared as I finished the story. We heard something that sounded like something running on hard wood. We looked up, and it was coming from the attic. But this time, it sounded like it was trying to get away. And then, it was gone. We didn't know what it was that was haunting my mom, but after that night, it never came back. And my mom thanked me for helping her. Amen.
I'm currently smudging as I type this out. The smoke from the sage is rising around me, cleansing the air. I'm praying for myself here, and for anyone who is reading this as well. I beg you, whenever you finish this, I want you to do the same. Light your sage, cedar, say your prayers, and protect yourself. Once you understood the secrets I'm going to tell you, the spirits will know, and so will the others. Bad medicine, how much do you know about it? In your culture, it might be known as witchcraft, bad juju, voodoo, black magic, brujeria. So when I talk about it on here, it's going to be all in the same context. However, we as Dene don't talk openly about witchcraft or bad medicine, especially about the spirits. I'm not referring to curses being cast or words being spoken out. That's just the surface level of things. I'm not even supposed to write these things out. Everybody in the rest teaches you that speaking about witchcraft is to invite it into your life. When you speak of it, it listens. When you acknowledge it, it comes closer. And when it gets close, it's not gonna leave. You might see a shadow that follows you. It can be a sickness that creeps into your home, into you, or into your family. Among our people, it's not like what you might see in movies or read in books. It's something that's been twisted. Those who walk the road, those who give themselves over to the dark, become something else. They become evil, not just to themselves, but to all of those who cross their path. And I'm not specifically talking about skinwalkers. No, not at all. This is just the beginning of what goes on in their dark circles. I have a story to tell you, but before I get into that, let me explain why I'm telling you these things. I know you heard about skinwalkers, from how to become one, what they do in the graves, how they are literally the opposite of good, which you can easily look up. But there is one thing I have never heard somebody talk about when it comes to this, and that is the ceremonies these people who practice bad medicine, what these ceremonies are, and what they do. I do apologize if this offends anybody, if it feels like I'm crossing a line. Believe me, I thought about that. But some things must be said, even when it feels wrong to speak of them in my opinion. People need to know that this stuff is real. It exists, especially here on the Navajo Res. You most likely heard about them too, maybe even seen them. Stories about them keeping pace with the car before disappearing into the night. Some say they wear the skins of animals, shifting between human and beast. The stories of how you must kill a family member, someone close to you, to truly take on the power of a skinwalker. But that doesn't really make sense when you think about it. What I actually mean is, yeah, you might have to actually kill a family member, But if that was the case, everybody would be walking around being a skinwalker, especially with all the crimes being committed. So anyways, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. In a time when so many of our people are losing touch with their own culture, when traditional teachings are slipping away, I have my grandpa. While there's others who might forget the old ways, my grandpa made sure we never did. He ingrained in us everything we needed to know. And while I'm still young, I will forever be grateful that he passed everything he knew on to us. From the moment that I was old enough to listen, my grandpa taught me the traditional way of life. He passed down our teachings, the ceremonies, our family history, and the songs of our people. Every detail mattered to him, and he made sure it mattered to us as well. It wasn't by chance that he did this. He knew so much because he had been taught the way of good medicine. He also claimed that in his younger years, he had been on the path to becoming an official medicine man. He trained under the elders, learned the prayers, the ways to heal, and all the ceremonies as well. My grandpa always said that the power of good medicine wasn't just about healing sickness. It was about knowing how to live in harmony with the world around you. He believed that everything had a spirit, and that it was our job to treat those spirits with respect. He introduced us to the medicine men in our community, those who would come whenever sickness would arrive, or when there was something that needed to be done. They would sing their songs, make offerings, and call upon the spirits for guidance and healing. But my grandpa's journey to becoming a medicine man was cut short. He never spoke much about why, but I remember the way his eyes would become whenever this subject would come up. He would simply say, "Something happened," and that was all. He would leave it at that. From what I was told, from what my father would tell me, it wasn't because he couldn't. He was on his way, respected by the elders in the community, but something changed. Something happened that he chose to step back from the calling, and he never returned to it. Even after everything, he remained a well of knowledge for the community. He carried the wisdom, but he never practiced medicine, at least not the way the leaders would. Whatever it was that made him stop, I know it stayed with him. And while he shared so much with us, there were some things he carried in silence. I know there's pride in knowing where you come from, and my grandpa made sure that we understood that. He taught us how to respect the land, how to give offerings, and how to listen to the spirits of our ancestors. He would often say, "These things, son, they are not just for us. They're for those who came before us, and for those who will come after. You carry them now, and you will carry them as you walk this journey." So while there were others who lost their way, I was raised very traditional, and for that, I will always be grateful. So hopefully that gives you some background on my grandpa and the relationship that me and my family had. Growing up, my grandpa always told me stories of his family, of our ancestors, of his journey in life growing up on the res. It was his way of bonding with us, sharing the lessons of our people through the power of storytelling, you can say. I can still remember the way we would sit around the fire, or sometimes just around in the living room with him, listening as he told us everything. He talked about his life, the history of our people. However, there was always something special about the stories that he would specifically tell me, alone. Those scary stories, they were the ones that really captured my attention. But my dad, he didn't like them. He did tell my grandpa to stop telling me these things. He didn't want me hearing them. He didn't want me growing up with those images in my head. And as time went on, he did stop telling me some of these stories. However, there was one that he told me late one night. I was spending the night at his home to take care of him, and he said he wanted to tell me a story. I, of course, pulled up a chair beside him, and he started. He asked me if I really wanted to know why he stopped pursuing being a medicine man. I nodded, and he simply said, "I came across a dark ceremony." He said it happened because someone in their circle of medicine man had turned to the wrong path, practicing the reversed evil ways. The people had been suspicious, but no one believed it would go this far. That's why they let their guard down. It impacted all the medicine man in training at the time. It wasn't some kind of test or lesson. Because of this, he said, he was no longer allowed to practice medicine. Even after a few decades, they allowed him, but he simply didn't want to. He told me he had been in training when one evening, it was another medicine man's turn to guide them. Someone they trusted. They were all invited to a hogan that evening. I'll tell you exactly how he told it to me, in his own words. As we entered the hogan, one of the chief elders stood there, facing the north side of the hogan, not moving. There was something wrong as soon as we walked in. It was 3 of us. Something about his silence and the way he stared that made me uneasy. We took a few steps closer, and that's when we saw it. A coyote's lifeless eye stared at the hole in the north wall. My heart sank. The north wall. It meant death. It was made to release a spirit, but it also trapped something darker inside. We were standing in a death hogan. I glanced at the elder standing beside me, confused. What are we doing here? My voice trembled in my head, but I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. We both knew we shouldn't be here. From the time that we were young, we were told to stay away from death hogans. It was drilled into us. Never go near them, and never step inside. The elders warned us that the air in the death hogan is thick with something you can't see, something you can't fight. Whenever someone has died inside, especially in a bad way, the spirit becomes trapped in the walls, lingering with a darkness that's not meant for the living. To enter was to invite that darkness onto yourself. The elder beside me looked around. Finally, he broke the silence. "Why are we here?" he said under his breath, his voice low. The elder shook his head, his jaw tight. "This doesn't feel right. We're not supposed to even test things like this. The wall, it's been broken," I whisper. The elder next to me didn't respond right away, but his eyes never left that hole. He knew what it meant. I wasn't even aware at the time that this wasn't a normal ceremony. We were told it was a gathering to strengthen our bond, but I was wrong. I still thought it was part of the ceremony. The chief elder, the one that was supposed to be teaching us, walked over to the coyote that was on the ground, its body limp, and he began to gut it. I remember him whispering, saying something softly, even though I didn't understand the words. At first, I thought it was just a prayer, but something was off. He started pouring the coyote's blood into a bowl as he cut it from the anus to the throat. Very precise as he worked the hide. Not wanting to damage it, I could tell. The fire in the middle of the hogan was burning hot. I watched him wipe sweat from his face as he continued. He then removed the eyes, the tongue, the throat, and finally, the skull and the brain. I could tell this wasn't his first time. He knew what he was doing. He fashioned the hood from the skull cap, fitting it as though it was a piece of his own skin. I know it's foolish of me to think this way, but I still wanted to think positive. Maybe this was something to honor the animal. Maybe. Even though a strange way to do it. He then tossed the rest of what he had taken out into the fire, and I remember him praying every time he did something. He then continued gutting the animal, removing the feet, front and back. The remaining fur was draped over his body, covering his chest and waist. He then reached into the fire, where he had placed some of the animal's body fat. He took the charred remains and mixed them into the bowl of blood, adding charcoal pieces until the mixture was thick and black. And as he did all of this, he prayed again. But I know it wasn't a prayer to the Creator. It wasn't anything that I had ever heard before. I know at this point you're wondering why we didn't get out of there. Well, the truth is, everything happened so fast. He wanted us to see what he was doing, and to be honest, I felt paralyzed. After mixing the charred fat and blood, I watched him step away from the fire. He moved over to an old blanket on the ground. As he lifted the edge of the blanket, the smell hit me. It was thick and rancid, filling the hogan with the stench of death. I froze when I saw what was underneath. A body. At first I thought it might have been someone who had died in the hogan, a spirit needing to be set free through the north wall. But no, this body didn't belong to the spirit of the hogan. This was something else. I recognized the person. A drunk man, someone who had disappeared from Gallup a few weeks ago. I know because his family sought out help as to what happened to him. This had even been brought up at our meetings to pray for the community. The body was rotting, smell hanging thick in the air. The chief elder then bent down, taking from the body what he needed: teeth, bones, and skin. His hands moved quickly, cutting and peeling, as if it was nothing to him. He then took a large piece of the dead man's fat, rubbing it across his face and body. Then, he reached back into the fire, grabbing some ashes and smearing them over himself, blackening his skin. With the bowl of blood and fat in front of him, he dipped his hand into the thick paste. Slowly he began to draw designs on his face and chest, lines and symbols that I didn't even recognize. He then took the coyote skin next, fitting it over his head and back, tying it back with a thin string. I remember the way he looked after that. He smiled. "Perfect fit," he said, his skin blackened with ashes, the coyote's hide draped over him like a second skin. But he wasn't done. He moved over to the corner of the hogan, where he laid out a small piece of animal hide, something I couldn't recognize, but it felt wrong. There was something off about it. One by one, he started placing objects on it. A picture of a Navajo family standing in front of a silver RV, a broken piece of a whiskey bottle, strands of a woman's hair, a tooth of a snake, and bone fragments from the dead man who was there. He then placed each item carefully. But the last thing he added sent a shiver down my spine. A bullet. He reached back into the bowl of blood, scooping a handful and then splashing it across the hide and the items laid before him. The red spread everywhere, and I felt the air grow even heavier. Then he poured more blood into a thin cup that he had, mixing in the blood of the dead man. As he did all of this, he began to whisper again. He then tied a bundle. Then, just as he finished, he said, "So tomorrow night, we'll see how tough you really are, Mr. Lawman." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just an evil ceremony being performed. It was also a curse. And whoever this Mr. Lawman was, he was marked for something terrible to come. The chief elder then moved over to the fire, tossing what was left of the coyote, its unused skin and the remaining blood and fat into the flames. I stood frozen. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had to get out of there. But before I could move, a sound from outside caught both of our attention. It was faint, but it was there. The chief elder's head snapped towards the north wall. He then whispered in a low voice, "You know it's bad to look into the north hole of the death hogan." As soon as he said this, you could hear the steps of someone running outside. I then felt a chill run down my spine. Someone had been watching us. The chief elder then said, "Whoever that was will soon be no more." That's when I was the first one to leave out of that forbidden place. I didn't know who else ran, but I know the other two also left with me. As I did, I looked back, and the chief elder just stood there, watching us go, not even moving. Whenever we ran, we all went different ways, and that was the last time I ever saw them. My grandpa then paused in his story. He then let out a small cough, barely noticeable, but there was something about the way he did it. His hand was trembling as he reached for his cup of tea. "Grandpa, are you alright? It's just this old body catching up with me. Nothing more." He then set the cup down, and looked at me for a long time before speaking again. You know, ever since that night, I haven't been able to sleep the same. There's this feeling, the air from that death hogan still lingers. I can feel it after all these years. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night, and it feels like I'm back at that place. Grandpa, did you ever do anything about it? I mean, after what happened, did anyone help you? I asked. He nodded slowly. They tried. My elders performed the night chant ceremony for me. 9 days and 9 nights of prayer and healing. It was supposed to cleanse me, to drive out whatever darkness had clung to me after that night. And maybe it did. But there are some things that don't leave you so easy. That's the thing about bad medicine. Once it touches you, a part of it stays. He coughed again, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair for support. I wanted to ask more, but I could tell that he was starting to get tired. He then sighed deeply, rubbing his chest like the very act of breathing had become a struggle. I'll tell you the rest tomorrow, he said. I need to rest now. It's been a long night. I didn't push him. How could I? I didn't want to burden him further. All right, Grandpa, I said softly. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. He gave me a weak smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes, you can say. He then stood up. I watched him as he walked to his room, and before he closed the door, he said, "Don't ever let the darkness touch you. Always remember what I taught you." The door then closed behind him, and that was it. The next day never came. My grandpa passed away quietly in his sleep that night. He took the rest of the story with him. Those final details he never got to share. And to this day, I'm still wondering if what he saw that night in that death hogan finally caught up with him somehow. I'll be honest with you, curiosity is one hell of a thing. It eats at you. It calls you. It's at the back of your mind, especially when it comes to things like this. The more you're told not to look, not to listen, the more tempting it is. I would be lying if I said I never felt this way. The struggle to know, to understand these dark things. The battle between wanting to know and knowing that you shouldn't. It's always there, pulling at you from both sides. After my grandpa passed, there were moments I found myself thinking back to that night, wondering what else he had seen, what he hadn't told me. I did seek wisdom from one of the medicine men that we as a family have gone to several times. It was someone who my grandpa knew. When I told him why I was there, what I was looking for, he didn't need me to finish. He knew right away. His face changed, and the silence between us felt thick. He knew what my grandpa had passed down to me. I could see it in his eyes. He took a deep breath and finally asked, "He shared with you, didn't he? He told you what he saw?" I nodded. There was no point in hiding it. The elder sat back, rubbing his chin. "You're walking a fine line. A very fine line. The spirits, they know that you heard the story now, and they watch to see what you do with that knowledge." His words hit me hard, but there was something else. Something he said next that made my skin crawl. "This is why it's important to know who you talk to, what you listen to," he said. "There's dark things out there that thrive on curiosity. They draw you in, and once they grab a hold of you, there's no turning back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear what you heard. And if you're not safe, they'll consume you before you even realize what's happening. I'm telling you all these things so you can learn to stay away from those evil practices. What your grandpa saw, what he experienced, it wasn't meant for him, and it's also not meant for you. Once you open that door, even just a crack, it's impossible to close it again." Part of me wanted to push further, to ask more questions, to understand what exactly happened in that death hogan, but the other part of me knows better. He then said, evil has a way of finding those who are looking for it. You don't even need to go searching. It'll come to you. The elder stood up slowly, placing a hand on my shoulder, and told me, come back tomorrow, towards the evening. I'm going to talk to a few of the other elders and perform a ceremony so that you can be cleansed. I'll have 2 other elders with me. We'll talk more then. There are some things you need to know. 2 more? I asked. He nodded slowly. It will be here. It's better that way. There are some things that I can't explain on my own. But don't be late. It's important that we begin just as the sun starts to set. Also, bring something personal with you. Something that holds meaning. This sort of threw me off. Not the personal thing. You know how hard it is to get a medicine man to see you. Not to mention that he said tomorrow he would have 2 more with him. Either way, the ceremony has to be performed. As I was walking out, he said, remember, son, some things aren't meant to be understood, but they are meant to be dealt with. Tomorrow evening, we'll start to deal with them. And that's why I'm sharing this with you all. Learn from my grandpa's story, and learn from me. Don't let curiosity lead you down a path you can't come back from. Because the truth is, some doors are better left closed. And once you start seeking, the darkness will know, and it won't let you walk away. Samantha, she told me about it on our 3rd date. We were watching a movie on her couch when I made a move to kiss her. She whipped her hand in front of my face and blocked me.
There's something you need to know,
she said. I braced myself. Here it comes. The whole speech about I'm not ready for a relationship. It was the last thing that I wanted to hear, especially because I was already crazy about her.
I have a removable face.
That's a new one. You have a what now? I was about to laugh, but she was wearing a deadly serious expression.
I have a removable face.
Is that like a metaphor or something?
No, my face is literally removable. Look closely. You can see the seam.
She lifted her chin and traced her jawline with a finger. After admiring how beautiful her neck was for a moment, I leaned in for an inspection. It was very hard to see, but it did look like there was a slightly unnatural transition there from her face to her throat. I grew dizzier as a dozen questions rushed into my brain.
Don't bother asking why or how or anything like that,
said Samantha.
I can't tell you that. If that's going to be a problem, you should leave now. I'm letting you know this because I like you and I want to take the next step. But this is non-negotiable.
Okay, I said, unsure of what was happening. Not a problem. So what? You have a removable face. Who cares? It looks good.
There's something else. Once a day, usually in the evening, I have to remove the face and disinfect the inside of it. If I don't, it will rot. This takes about an hour, give or take, depending on how my day went. During this time, you must never, ever look at my real face. Never. Do you understand?
Yes, got it. Don't ask about it. Don't look at your real face. Samantha stood up.
Now, I'm going to go into the bathroom and clean my face. That will give you plenty of time to think about what I've told you. If you're here when I'm done, that's great. I would like that. But if you're gone, I'll understand.
She turned and walked into her bedroom. I sat in stunned silence as I heard the bathroom door close. I gave the last thing some serious thought. It was possible that it was a joke of some kind. Was it possible that it was true? Well, it was possible to transform an actor's face with movie makeup, so I suppose it was possible that Samantha was wearing a removable face every day. Maybe she had a horrible accident where her flesh had been mangled. Maybe her face had been melted by acid, or burned by fire, or the skin shorn off by heavy machinery. If it had, I would never know. because she would never tell me, and I would never see it. I picture a face of raw, naked muscle rotting away. Could I kiss her? Is that what I was kissing? But wasn't that what we all were, under the skin? Just muscle and bone and blood and squishy organs. I paced around the living room, running my hand through my hair. I liked Samantha a lot. She was smart and funny, and beautiful. But was that beauty real? Did it count? Did it matter if it was real or not? Was I being superficial, even worrying about it? When she came out of the bathroom, I was still there. I looked at her face. She smiled, and I was in love. We dated and we moved in together, and we decided to get married. For the most part, it was a completely normal relationship, typical of two young people in love, building a life together. During the day, it was easy to forget about the face altogether. It looked natural enough, and only in certain positions, in certain lights was there ever any indication that it wasn't natural. But every night was the same. Samantha would close herself in the bathroom, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 2, and clean the inside of her face. The curiosity never left me. I would sit there and wonder what was underneath that face. I came so close to barging in on her a few times, but I never did. I did occasionally ask her about it, about what, if anything, had happened, about how it was possible to make the face look so real, about what it really looked like underneath. I tried to get her into showing me, assuring her that I loved her no matter what, and didn't give a damn what her real face looked like. I was just curious, that's all. But she never showed me, or told me the story behind it. She didn't get upset at me, unless I was really badgering her. She would just shrug and say,
You know you can't see it. You know I can't tell you about it.
I never told anybody about Samantha's face. It's not that she asked me not to. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. Except once, I did tell somebody about it. It was during my pre-wedding party, the groom's party. We had rented several cabins and spent the night drinking and packing our noses with powders that we shouldn't have been packing our noses with. Everyone else had passed out, and the sun was creeping up behind us as I stood on the majestic cliffs with my friend Chris, looking down on the waves crashing against the rocks. Chris was my best friend, as close to a brother as I had known. We'd grown up together, and we visit each other at college very often, and we spent the summers together as well. After college, we moved to different cities, but we stayed in close contact. Standing there on the cliff, I told Chris about Samantha's face. At first, he thought I was joking. Then came 1,000 questions, both of which I couldn't answer. What's underneath? I'm not sure. Doesn't that drive you crazy, not knowing? I shrugged. There's a lot of things I don't know. I don't know how to do calculus, and I also don't know what happens when we die. But dude, she's about to be your wife, and you don't even know what she looks like. I mean, I have to take a look. Like, could you set a camera up in the bathroom? That's where she does it, right? Set up a camera and have a look, and then you'll know. I sighed. Yeah, it does drive me crazy. I have asked her 1,000,000 times, but she told me I could never look. Gotta respect that, man. Even if I don't like it. That's love. Chris laughed. You telling me to respect a woman? Up is down now. Then we fell back into talking about old times as a new day dawned. Chris was in town for business last week, and he planned on spending the weekend at our house. The conversation we had at the cliff happened 4 years ago, and we hadn't spoken about Samantha's face since then, despite keeping in close contact and seeing each other as often as two people transforming into adults in different parts of the country can. It happened on Saturday evening. We were lounging in the backyard, deep into the beer, having just finished with some grilled steaks when I got a text message from work. I gotta make a work call,
Seriously?
said Samantha, raising an artificial eyebrow.
On a Saturday night?
It's my biggest client, babe. Sorry.
It is what it is, I guess. I'm going to head inside and get cleaned up. Chris, are you okay just hanging out for a bit?
I'll be fine. Got my beer, got some weeds to pull in your garden. God knows your lazy ass husband isn't gonna do it. The tomatoes are choking to death. It's a tragedy. I rolled my eyes and went into the side yard to make my phone call. 15 minutes into it, I heard the screams coming from inside. Both my best friend and my wife were screaming. I dropped the phone and ran into the house and down the hall to our bedroom. Through the open door, I could see that the door to the master bathroom was also standing open.
Don't come in.
Screamed Samantha.
I don't have my face on. Call an ambulance. Oh God, he looked.
She sounded desperate and truly horrified. That made me desperate and horrified as well. And I wanted to rush into the bathroom, but I knew right away that it would be a mistake. I knew suddenly that Samantha didn't want me to look at her real face, not out of a sense of vanity, but for my own safety. Chris started staggering backwards out of the bathroom. He was holding out a paper clip, which he had used to pick the privacy lock. Now he was stabbing it, again and again, into his eyes, shouting gibberish. He was clearly in the depths of madness, and it turned my stomach to see him mutilate himself.
Call a fucking ambulance.
My wife screamed.
Don't come in here. He fucking looked.
I turned and ran back to the side yard, where my phone was lying in the newly mowed grass. My client was still on the line, alarmed, asking what was happening, what all the screaming was. I hanged up on him and called 911. When the paramedics got there, Chris was having a seizure in the hallway. Samantha was stroking his head, sobbing. Her face was on, but it had been done pretty quickly, and everything looked a little bit off. My world has been dark this past week. My best friend is in a hospital under suicide watch. He's completely blind, and mostly catatonic except when he slips into a violent babbling mania. The doctors are optimistic that his state is temporary, but they don't know the truth about what caused it, because I told the paramedics that Chris had taken a large dose of mushrooms and fallen into psychosis. I saw no good reason to tell the truth about what happened. Who would believe that somebody looked at my wife's real face? That it would make somebody insane? At best, we would be the subjects of a long investigation. We would have to prove that what we were saying was true by showing somebody Samantha's face. Then the same thing would happen again. And what about after that? I had no idea and no interest in finding out. For Samantha's part, I knew that she would never consent to show anybody her real face, no matter what consequences she would face if she refused to. I did get a follow-up call from the police, asking me to confirm my story. The hospital found no traces of drugs in Chris's blood. If they end up testing his hair, I will likely be in a lot of trouble. But that's the least of my concern. Samantha is in a state of her own. She still cleans the inside of her face, though not as normally as she used to. And when she puts it back on, it's always a little bit different, and it's beginning to smell a little bit weird. I tried to assure her that it wasn't her fault. He knew, I said. I told him that nobody was ever allowed to look at it. He knew, and then he broke into the bathroom. This is not on you, babe. Please, talk to me.
Not on me? That one look at my fucking face makes people insane?
I'm doing my best to hold it all together. Do you know what's strange about this? Despite what happened to Chris, I still find myself curious about what my wife's real face looks like. More curious than ever, really. I have something to share. Not exactly sure what happened. I don't have an explanation that fits everything, but maybe some of you might know more about what happened. After thinking about it for a while, I can't shake the feeling that it might have something to do with native folklore or something supernatural, especially given the area that we were in. The Black Hills and Badlands have deep cultural and native history, and what my friend and I experienced there was far from normal. I'll just tell you what happened, and maybe you'll have your own thoughts about what it could have been. We got an Airbnb and the first night there, my friend was starting to get a little bit sick, possibly a cold, so she went to bed much earlier than me. On the trip to South Dakota, we talked about random weird stuff, as two best friends do on a long road trip. One of these things was how strict we are about closing the lid of the toilet before we flush. We're both big germaphobes, so closing the lid before we flush is a habit we both had for a long time. It's a weird fact, but it's relevant. She's asleep by the time that I finish my dinner and shower, and like any God-fearing American, I use the bathroom before I get in the shower. After I get out, I go check on her because I'm a little worried about how she's feeling. She's absolutely crashed in her room, and I can see her breathing and also hear her snore. After I check on her, I decided to try to go to sleep. The Airbnb is a pretty small trailer. The host is rated as a super host. No strange or negative reviews. My friend's room is on one side of the trailer, then the common area with the entrance that opens directly into the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen. The door to my room is right next to the kitchen drawers and sink. My friend sleeps with her door open, and I sleep with my door closed. I fall asleep quickly, but after a few hours I wake up because I can hear what sounds like drawers rolling on their tracks right outside my door. Now, my friend has been known to sleepwalk, so I think that's what it is. I'm wondering what to do when I realize that I really need to use the bathroom. I'm not mentally ready to go out and see my friend sleepwalking. Honestly, it's always freaked me out a bit, even though I know she can't help it. I open the door, and there's no one there. No drawers are open. Nothing looks out of place. And it wasn't a matter of minutes passing since I heard it. It had been seconds. Even if my friend had ran back to her room on the other side, I would have definitely noticed. I'm trying to rationalize everything as I make my way to the bathroom. Like maybe some animal was doing some weird stuff under the trailer, and it just so happened to sound like drawers. However, when I get to the toilet, something is off, and it takes me a split second to realize what it is. The toilet lid is not only up, but there is pee in the bowl. So I text her and say, I'm trying to just chalk all this up to you sleepwalking, and I tell her what all has happened. After I finish my business, I go to check on her again, but it seems like she hasn't moved an inch, hasn't even rolled over, not even pulled the covers up. I'm just like, what the fuck? But I'm determined to enjoy my trip, so I go back to my room, lay down, and try to go back to sleep. Any sleep I got was super light, and I wake up a lot, but I don't hear anything else. My friend woke up at 4:30 to officially use the bathroom, saw my text, and just kinda said, maybe. And we left it at that for the day. Neither one of us wanted to talk about it, so when we wake up, we head out early for breakfast for a full day of hiking in the Badlands, and it was honestly amazing. Beautiful scenery, a bunch of great hikes, and we saw a ton of wildlife. The events of the night were put out of my head. Even when we got back to the Airbnb, I was most likely just scaring myself because I'm in a new place far from home. We then eat dinner, take our showers, lay down, and I fall asleep pretty quickly as I'm exhausted from the day. But this night, around 2 or 3, I think, I wake up because there's a steady scratching on the wall outside my room. I know it had been going on for some time, because it had worked itself into my dream, and I was having a nightmare about some monster coming after me. The details about the nightmare aren't really clear, but I remember the fear I felt when I woke up to that noise. I know some people would say, it's just scratching, it's not a big deal, but it sparked some kind of primal fear in me. I texted my friend, and I asked her if she could hear it. As soon as I texted her, the noise just stopped. No taper off or anything. It just suddenly stopped. She texted back a few hours later and said she didn't hear anything, but that if I was scared I could come sleep with her. She also offered up the idea of it possibly being a wild animal, being attracted to the smell of the food we had been cooking. I just held on to that idea and let it be. The beds weren't very big, so I decided to stay in my own room, now that I had a semi-logical explanation. The thing is, the trailer was lifted, and the place on the wall that was being scraped up was high up. Again, I push any further thoughts out of my mind and try to go back to sleep. We have one more day of hiking in the Black Hills, then one more night, then we'll head back home. The Black Hills are beautiful, one of my favorite parts of the trip, but this whole time I'm terrified of getting separated from my friend for some reason, even though it's daylight and we're on very popular trails. So that was weird, the feeling that I had. We do our hikes there, then head back to our Airbnb for our final night. At this point, I would like to add that as two young females, we try to be as safe as possible, sharing our locations with a few friends and family members. She has a gun and she is licensed to carry. I have some pepper spray that I keep on me at all times. We move stuff in front of the door to block the entrance in case a creeper was trying to break in. And of course, we keep the doors and windows locked. We did check the windows as soon as we got there the first night. We checked under the beds every night. Again, it's a small trailer, and not a lot of hiding spots for creepers that we wouldn't think to look. We had agreed to leave about 7 in the morning to head back home. However, about 5 a.m., a few things start to happen. The scratching noise wakes me up again. It had been going on for so long that it worked its way into my dream again. I was dreaming that a big cat was stalking us while we were trapped in the wilderness. When I woke up and grabbed my phone to text my friend, it immediately stopped. I see that my friend had texted me. She was asking, "Did you hear it?" I think she finally heard the scratching, so I text back and say, "Yes, I did." I walk into the living room where she is, and I see that she's so freaked out that she has her gun out. She's been through courses. She knows not to draw your weapon unless there's clear danger and you're ready to shoot. But she was scared, and she doesn't scare so easily. I asked her what's going on, and she said, "I woke up because I heard a low noise. Then I heard shuffling and footsteps in the kitchen. I sat up in bed, and I realized that my door had been shut. That's when I texted you and grabbed the gun." So a couple of things. She slept with her door completely open every night. The heater kicking on never closed it. She wasn't tall enough to kick it shut. Even nudging it with her finger wasn't forceful enough to shut it all the way. It had to be pulled shut. Also, we would have heard someone coming in through one of the windows or the door. Everything was locked tight. We checked every night before bed. Also, the morning before, I had walked around the trailer, looking for signs of damage where the scratching was. There was none. I was also looking for a loose spot where an animal could have gotten under the trailer, to make the noises that we were hearing in the kitchen, but there was nothing. My friend asked me what I wanted to do. The sun wasn't going to be up for a little bit, but at that point I'm pissed. I actually haven't had a good night's sleep in several days. I then say, "Let's get everything and go. Keep your gun out and ready. We don't have a lot, so it's not going to take a long time to get it all in the car." So that's what we do, and we get the fuck out of there. Also, 3 nights there, and we didn't see the moon a single time. I say this because that's what I wanted to do. We even looked it up on Google, and it was supposed to be right around 1/4 to 1/2, so it definitely should have been visible. We could see all the stars, and it wasn't overcast at night. We kept saying on how everything was so weird. That morning as we were leaving, the moon was there, so bright. Like, this might be stupid, but I'm not sure if it just rises up later in South Dakota. But sometimes we would get back to the Airbnb kind of late. It was just weird. We did message the Airbnb host twice about it. She was one of those that was labeled as super responsive and replies within an hour, but she refused to respond to our messages with any kind of explanation. We ended up offering our own, a wild animal of some kind, but she didn't even say anything about that. However, I don't believe it was an animal at this point. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't that. After we put many hours between us and there, and the sun came up, that's when my friend finally said, "I wanted to tell you what I already saw that first night in the park, at the Pinnacle's Outlook," and proceeded to tell me about the humanoid figure. She also said that she didn't feel like she had been sleepwalking at all while we were even there. And before I wrap it up, There's a few things I want to say. I checked the Airbnb site several times since then. All great reviews. No mention of anything similar to what we experienced. We did end up leaving a 3-star review. We tried to put what happened to us the best we could. Again, chalking it up to an animal. The host did leave us a great review, while still never responding to our questions. Another thing, I went to another hiking trip with my husband about a month and a half later. I heard scratching on this trip as well, but this time I was able to say, that's a squirrel or something similar. And it did not bring about that sense of absolute primal fear and the feeling of being hunted, even while you were laying in bed when you're supposed to be safe. When I was walking around checking the siding for damage after the scratching, I checked the sheet metal that lined the bottom for loose sections, and I didn't find anything. I also looked for somewhere an animal could have fit through, but there was nothing. The history of the land is also pretty strange, and I believe that the land holds on to stuff like that. The Native Americans literally named it Evil Lands. And I was like, well, they wouldn't have done that for no reason. I have seen that some of the younger natives in the area said that their older relatives wouldn't let them go near the area, which I actually didn't know before planning the trip. My friend asked if I would ever go back, and I said most likely not. It was beautiful, but I feel like whatever that thing was let me off with a warning this time. And if I go back, I feel like something will definitely happen. A lot of people were asking how come my friend just decided to keep the sighting of the humanoid figure to herself at first. Well, she did, but she's very logical, and she'll try her best to rationalize things, like myself. I also think she didn't want to scare either of us so bad that it made looking back on this trip more like a scary experience, even though now that's how I see it. But still, I think the less that we talk about it, the less that we acknowledge it, the better it is, because I believe these things feed on fear. We were already scared, but I know talking about it would have escalated the fear much more. If anybody has an explanation for this, let me know. So I was 20 years old and still living with my parents because I was poor, which meant that I had to travel with them and go with them everywhere. We figured it was time to visit some family in the very southern part of the world, called Tennessee. This area was backwoods, pretty wild. These people are very traditional. They do a lot of things we would consider weird, but a family get-together means we all have to hang out. Now, they are decent people once you get to know them. Somehow, I ended up grouped with 3 cousins and a friend from out of town. I'll call them Eddie, Garrett, Austin, and Trent. These are the names of some people I'm related to, but they're not the actual names of the people I'm referring to. Does that make sense? Sorry about this. I'm not really great at making up names. So anywho, we snuck off with 2 6-packs that my grandpa left out. He's a very good man, but he's, how should I say it? He leaves everything, everywhere. So me, Garrett, Austin, and Trent decide that we're gonna go drink somewhere away from the property so nobody will see us. We end up wandering out into the woods. We find a clearing about 30 minutes away. I'm not really sure at this point. Adrenaline kills my sense of time, and we were just talking on the way there. Garrett, the cousin from these parts, seemed really nervous as we kept walking. He's older than us, but he kept complaining about how we shouldn't be doing this, that it's wrong. The rest of us kept telling him to stop being a bitch and have some fun for once. Now I gotta mention, like I said, they do things differently down here. So Garrett was always carrying an old rifle, like from the old days when they hunted for a living. So we lit up a small lamp and sat there in a circle just talking to one another. This whole time Garrett is quiet, and we start getting a little tipsy, not really drunk, just having a few beers. I had half a can and called it good. I still don't really have a taste for alcohol, I guess. Garrett then suddenly said, we shouldn't be here. I was thinking, well, we just stole beer from our head grandpa. Of course we shouldn't be out here. He then said again, don't understand. We really shouldn't be here. We should go. At this point, everyone is sort of annoyed with Garrett because he's just saying that we shouldn't be out here. Fine, we'll go in just a few minutes. Let's just finish these last few beers. Not even a minute passes when suddenly it got really cold. We really shouldn't be here, guys. We have to leave, Garrett said again. At this point, Austin laughed, and then Trent mumbled something under his breath. The lamp that we brought flickered as a bug bumped into it. A big-ass bug at that. Garrett, now looking super pissed off, got up and walked over to Austin and basically stood him up like a good little soldier. We're leaving, right now. Austin then stopped laughing and said, chill, let's get out of here because this dude is a party pooper. We all got up and Garrett continued staring where Austin had been sitting at. That's when he said, we are leaving. Except, he wasn't telling us no more. He wasn't even looking at us. He was staring into the tree line. Trent and I were trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Suddenly, Garrett picked up his gun and aimed it towards Trent. Trent got scared. You could see it all over his face. He said, Garrett, what the fuck are you doing, man? We're leaving right now, ain't we, fellas? Garrett said. And that's when we noticed that Garrett kept aiming towards the trees. Trent then slowly turned around out of curiosity to see if something was behind him, or figure out what the heck was going on. The trees were dark and you couldn't see anything beyond the clearing. The only source of light out there was that lamp that we had brought. But when Trent turned around, I swear he saw something because of his reaction. His eyes became big. I was too much of a chicken to see what was going on. But that's when Trent suddenly just took off running past Garrett, who kept aiming his gun at whatever was back there. Don't move until I tell you, but when I say it, run like a fox in a hen house, Garrett said. At this point I was too scared to try and say anything myself, so I just nodded my head. I turned my head to try and sneak a peek to see what Trent saw. Don't move, Garrett quietly said. He then picked up the lamp by hooking it with the muzzle. We're leaving right now. We don't want any trouble. We didn't mean anything by it, Garrett kept saying. And that's when I heard something moving in the bushes. Garrett stopped breathing for a moment, and the lamp swung gently. I'm not a fast man, but I know that night I was Usain Bolt. Austin was like 5 feet from me. I could hear him crying. At this point I was crying too. I heard 3 gunshots, one every few seconds, and then a scream. As I'm telling the story, I'm actually crying again. This isn't a joke, but it feels better to write everything down instead of storing it all up. Random, I know, but that's just how I cope with the situation. Anyways, have you ever heard a coyote yell? They sound like young kids, crying and yelling. I grew up with coyotes in my backyard. This was definitely not one of them. It was high pitch, higher than a coyote, and it was right behind us. Austin and I didn't even look at each other. We just kept running. We finally cleared the trees and entered some meadows near a creek. Garrett appeared behind us, rifle slung over his shoulder, shouting, "Keep running! Don't look back!" The scream was getting louder, but not in volume. It was getting closer. Garrett told us to keep going, and that we were almost across the line. He then stopped and took another shot before moving again. I was thinking, this is how I'm gonna die. Suddenly, there's more screams. We then saw an old fence, not more than 30 yards away. Austin leaped over it like he was in track, perfectly in sync and landing. Adrenaline does make you do some crazy things, so I also jumped over it. However, I landed on my back and saw stars. Garrett leaped over and took aim again, completely out of breath. We're on our side. Fuck off. That's when the screaming literally just stopped. There were no crickets or anything to fill the void left by it. Just 3 men crying and panicking. Austin was on his knees. I'm pretty sure he had just thrown up. I wasn't even there mentally anymore. Garrett, where's the lamp? Garrett kept his gun up, but his knees were shaking. He whispered, back in the trees. We all looked up and saw the tree line. Sure enough, the lamp was sitting in the trees. Something was standing near the trees, but it was way too tall. It didn't really move. It was just jittering back and forth. like someone had cut out the in-between frames of something that was animated. It moved back and forth across the trees. The light blocked out the details, which was perfectly fine by me. It turned and sort of moved across the ground. Its knees were backwards. Holy shit. Garrett was heaving now. His breath was ragged, but he seemed okay. "Garrett, what the hell's going on?" he then just said. "Shut the fuck up." That's when I saw another one appear from the woods and started to jitter. Garrett aimed and shot again. My ears rang for a second. These things, or whatever they were, rushed back and forth across the tree lines, falling in and out of the light. For a second, I thought I saw 3 shapes moving around, but I didn't care. I just wanted all of this to stop. The light in the trees flickered, and Garrett said, "When the light goes out, run as fast as you can, and scream as loud as you can for Grandpa. Don't stop, even if I tell you to. Even if anybody tells you anything, don't stop." Austin didn't even argue. I nodded, turning to stare at the trees. The light flickered again, but it came back. The shapes stopped moving. They got closer, bigger, something. I'm not sure at this point. The light flickered again. I expected them to get bigger again, but this time, the light didn't come back on, and that's when we booked it. Austin took the lead, rushing into the forest behind us, screaming for Grandpa. Garrett didn't even hold the rifle for a shot anymore. He was just running like we were. We heard the screams again, but they were getting closer. Suddenly, lights everywhere. The screams stopped. Grandpa was about 50 yards away with my dad, 3 distant uncles, and some other guy in a sweatshirt. They all had guns, and I was thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Garrett and Austin slid into the ground in front of Grandpa. At this point, I didn't care. I crashed into my dad, who hugged me for a second as I kept crying. Garrett was saying a bunch of things, but he was speaking so fast that I couldn't understand him anymore. Grandpa and one of the uncles just nodded. "Where's your friend?" "Trent ran ahead of us and passed us. Didn't he get to you?" Grandpa grabbed me and Garrett. Austin was curled up, weeping on the ground. "Take him to the house. Hide him in the guest room with no windows. They have seen what he looks like." At this point, I just wanted to go home, or anywhere that counted as home, just away from this. However, Grandpa said that I needed to go with them. "Garrett has a good gun," he said, "but now, since you want to act all tough and go into places and doing things you ain't supposed to be doing, you will be coming with us as well." And so that's how I ended up going back through the woods again. And I have to admit, I was still scared, but I felt a lot safer with all the guns and the rest of the people. The guy in the sweatshirt whispered something to Grandpa. My dad kept marching, his hand on my shoulder. Garrett then started calling out for Trent. "Start calling out to him," he told me. We then kept calling out, and that's when the guy in the sweatshirt whispered something to Grandpa again. We reached the fence, the exact same spot, vomit still on the ground where Austin had been. Grandpa then waved a flashlight around, illuminating the meadows. My uncles were doing the same. Suddenly, a shape darted under the tree line, crying and huffing. It was Trent. He stopped a few feet from the fence and fell to his knees, crying like me. Grandpa and the uncles were totally quiet. Garrett and I didn't move. "I thought I lost you guys back there at the campsite." I was scared because nobody was saying anything. Garrett then spoke first. "Where did you go, Trent?" "I got lost ahead of you. I got turned around, I guess." Grandpa leaned in and whispered something to the other guy's ear. He nodded. My dad then tightened his grip on my shoulder. Trent then said confused, "Aren't you guys gonna help?" Grandpa moved in with his gun a bit. "Help? With what?" "Help me get over the fence. The fence is tall, and I'm tired." Grandpa and my uncle slowly lifted their guns, aimed it at Trent. "What do you mean? You look fine." "Funny guys. Seriously, let me in." Grandpa was now more serious. I had never felt so scared of a person before in my life. Trent looked very nervous, and he kept looking back to the tree line. I felt like something was off. but I was too scared and stupid to figure out what it was. "Help me over the fence, guys," Trent said again. The guy in the sweatshirt then spoke up. "Come on over then, kid." Trent then stopped and stared at him in an evil way and said, "Not you. You can't. It's not your land." Grandpa then raised his gun again. My dad tightened his grip on my shoulder. "You're not invited. This is our side. He's a friend of the family. He's not the owner." Trent was still on his knees, but the way he was looking, it felt like he was ready to do something. You know that feeling you get when you have wanted something? Well, this felt the opposite. I felt like we were in a situation we weren't supposed to be in. At that moment, I realized what was so weird about Trent. He wasn't breathing. Trent was now staring daggers at Grandpa. The uncles pointed their guns at him. The other guy just held a flashlight on Trent's face. My dad then whispered something in my ear along the lines of, "Trent, we'll be fine." Grandpa then shot the gun off into the air, just like Garrett had done, and then waited for the shot to stop ringing out. Grandpa and my uncle slowly started to back away. Garrett and my dad guided me back. The guy in the sweatshirt kept the flashlight on Trent and moved in time with Grandpa. One of my uncles stayed behind, nodded to Grandpa, and kept pointing the gun at Trent. We slowly backed away. The guy in the sweatshirt was moving with us. I shouldn't look, but I turned around and looked anyway. The light was still pointed at Trent, but he was moving towards the tree line, like he was a puppet being dragged back. At this point I wanted to scream, but it was caught in my throat. My father grabbed my head and turned it. The scream started again, but they were distant now. Garrett looked over his shoulder, but Grandpa kept walking. We made it to the house. I went inside, and I heard Austin crying from one of the rooms. Dad took me inside, led me to bed, and he basically tucked me in for the first time since I was 10. The terrified kid inside of me didn't care. I spent the rest of the night staring at the wall, before falling asleep to the sound of gunshots and distant screams. The next day, I woke up to find Grandpa sitting at the table with most of my extended family, smoking and reading. Garrett was playing with some of the younger cousins. Austin was watching TV. My dad handed me some eggs and toast, smiling at me like nothing happened. Garrett saw me, smiled and motioned me over. "Trent went home this morning. He's alright." "Nobody's okay. Who said we're fine? What happened?" Garrett then gave me a look and quietly stated, "As a matter of fact, last night didn't happen. Trent is okay. Drop it." I did find out later that Trent did indeed make it home. He was found by some neighbors down the road. He apparently woke up in the brush and just ran home. He was convinced he got drunk or something and was hung over, which explained all the bruises he had on his back and neck. I only asked my grandpa what happened once. He said he had trouble with people on the nearby land, that they kept trying to get into his property. I then asked why they hadn't taken him. He looked at me, right into my eyes, and said, "I haven't invited them in. That's why." He wouldn't answer anything else after that. He just said, "Not a problem," to everything. It's been about 3 years. I had various visits to my family that ended with something similar going on, but nothing has ever come close to how scared I felt that night. Part of me wants to look up and see what those things were. Another part of me desperately repressing that urge. And my curiosity wants me to go look and investigate what those things were. However, I would say it's the closest thing I ever had to a Skinwalker incident. But to this day, I can't figure out exactly what those things were.